And we're starting off this list with kanashibari. Kanashibari is the term used in Japan for sleep paralysis, translating to bound up with metal, referring to the sensation of being unable to move as if something is holding you down. In Japanese folklore, kanashibari is attributed to vengeful spirits or demons, yokai, who possess their victims in the dead of night, immobilizing them and restricting their breathing. It is believed that these entities visit sleeping individuals and immobilize them as a means of exerting control or causing harm. Stories and legends about the experience have been passed down through generations, and people who experience this phenomenon often report hallucinations of eerie figures. They might hear sinister whispers and this overwhelming feeling of pressure upon the chest. There are various spiritual practices aimed at warding off these sleep demons. Protective measures include reciting prayers or mantras before sleep, or sleeping in specific positions like on your side in order to prevent the occurrence of kanashibari. At number 9, we have the boba. There are tons of different spirits and supernatural creatures in Bengali folklore, but one of them is the explanation for the strange experience of waking up in the middle of the night unable to move. That being the boba, a type of spirit in Bengali folklore translating to dumb, unable to speak. And these entities have an awful habit crawling into people's homes when they're asleep on their backs, climbing onto their chests and strangling them. It's not certain what these creatures are said to look like, but from the few interpretations I've seen, they seem to have an almost goblin or troll-like appearance. Number 8, the ghost pushing you down. Many Cambodians refer to sleep paralysis as the ghost pushing you down, and it is believed that the terrifying phenomenon is caused by deceased relatives returning from the grave to visit their loved ones on Earth, and that is definitely a haunting idea. It's one thing to have a witch or an unknown spirit or demon harass you in the middle of the night. That's just what they do. It sucks, but it's not necessarily shocking. How do you expect a demon to treat you? But grandma coming back from the grave to strangle you in the middle of the night? That is very upsetting. I'd like to think if a relative came back from the dead to see me, they'd have something nice to say, or at least, at the very least, just try not to physically attack me. This also conjures up a creepy idea that if there is indeed an afterlife, it could be much more sinister than we'd like to believe. Next up, we have the jinn. Primarily in pre-Islamic Arabian folklore, sleep paralysis was often thought to be caused by jinn possession. Jinns are spirits that inhabit the earth but are often unseen, able to take on a variety of different forms. They are mentioned in Islamic literature and are believed to be made of smokeless fire. They also possess free will and can be good, evil, or neutral, and it's sometimes said that during sleep paralysis, a person's body is vulnerable to jinn, who may try to harm or even possess them. Next up, we have the Alp. The Alp is a creature from German folklore that is often associated with sleep paralysis. It is believed to be a demonic being or a malevolent spirit that specifically targets individuals while they're sleeping. It's described as a small, shadowy figure, sometimes resembling a cat or a snake, but it is also capable of transforming into other forms. It also always wears a cap. It sits on the victim's chests, rendering them immobile and causing a sensation of suffocation, often appearing in nightmares and feeding off the fear and anxiety of its victims. According to legend, there are some methods you can apply to ward off the Alp or even stop it from appearing entirely, so take some notes. You can start by plugging up all the holes in your living space. Probably a good thing to do, but anyway, whether you're worried about a sleep demon or not, you still don't want mice. There are also various methods used to protect yourself from the Alp, such as placing a broom, a pair of scissors under your pillow, or hanging iron horseshoes from your bedpost, as it is believed that the creature is afraid of these objects. I'd also be afraid of sleeping with scissors under my pillow, so don't do that. Number 5, the Old Hag. The Night Hag or the Old Hag is kind of a catch-all term for the sleep paralysis creepy hallucination phenomenon, but there are specific places in the world that refer to the entity specifically as the Old Hag, primarily in Newfoundland, Canada. As the story goes, the Old Hag creeps into your home while you're sleeping, climbing onto your chest, mobilizing you, and restricting your breathing. So, why is it that an Old Hag is thought to be responsible? Well, many of the early settlers in Newfoundland came from England, Ireland, and Scotland, where the old haggard witch archetype was a big part of the folklore. So probably these settlers would have brought these stories and beliefs with them. And how awful it would be growing up back in the day and waking up just being like, yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night unable to move. Felt like there was something sitting on my chest. And then your mom's like, oh yeah, that was the Old Hag. You had an evil witch crawl into your room and sit on you. Probably won't be the last time. Well, comforting explanation. Number 4, the serpent. Now, this isn't one that's been documented throughout history extensively or anything. It's more of a personal account in my many years having experienced sleep paralysis, but I'm willing to bet there are people who have had something similar happen to them. So yeah, here's how the story goes. I was having a pretty good dream, and I was just lying in bed, and I know it was a dream because there was a woman there. Yes, only in my dreams does that ever happen. But things took a dark turn when this woman began to take on the form of a serpent, a massive-sized boa constrictor that began wrapping itself around me, strangling me, and preventing me from moving. Sleep paralysis, one of the many hallucinations I've had, happened like 9 years ago, still never forgotten it. I've had other sleep paralysis situations that are much more innocuous or just plain stupid, but this one really got in my head for a while. What strikes me so much about it is just how almost like biblical it is. It's the kind of story you'd hear in like the Dark Ages or something, you know? You shan't rest with the serpent harlot who cometh bearing companionship in the dead of night, lest she form into the serpent and steal the life from me. Anyway, to change things up a bit, let's talk about alien abduction. Alien abduction stories have been brought forth for years, and there are countless stories, many of which have some very common elements. People often describe waking up in a room with harsh light glaring at their face, unable to move as a strange extraterrestrial figure looms over their body, performing some sort of experiment or operation on them. People are almost always taken when in bed, too. Yes, the alien abduction phenomenon has often been attributed to sleep paralysis. Now, while I'm not sure if sleep paralysis explains every alien abduction account, there are some pretty convincing ones out there, right? I do think that this could be a very reasonable explanation for a lot of them. You know, I mean, think about it. You wake up, bright light shining in your face. That could just be sunlight streaming into your room, like right into your eyes. I've had sleep paralysis in the morning before. You're unable to move, so your brain comes up with an explanation of why, while you're being, you're being held down, and by what? Well, then you start to hallucinate. In this case, aliens standing over you, performing some sort of operation while you believe that you're just paralyzed or strapped down. La Passadeira. Originating in Brazilian folklore, the Passadeira is described as an old, haggard woman entity with long, dirty fingernails, crooked teeth, a witch-type nose, and red eyes. She's often seen smiling a big, maniacal, toothy grin, and in some stories, she lets out a loud cackle when you first see her. Now, there are, of course, many similarities to other sleep paralysis demons from across the world. She comes to unfortunate victims at night, steps on their chests, prevents them from moving. Sounds like almost every other sleep paralysis demon, but the Passadeira seems to be almost a cautionary tale about gluttony, as she resides on rooftops, making her way into people's homes to disrupt their sleep and terrify those who go to bed with full stomachs. Victims wake up with a putrid smell in the air, unable to move. That's when they hear a wicked laugh and the horrid sight of the old woman, almost resembling a corpse, slowly crawling onto their bed. And, to their horror, they can't even scream for help as she makes her way onto their stomach, making it almost impossible to breathe. But almost as quickly as she appears, she's suddenly gone. if you're lucky. But finally, we have the more contemporary Western interpretation of this strange phenomenon, shadow people. Now, there's countless stories of people waking up in the middle of the night, unable to move, and seeing a dark, shadowy figure standing at the edge of their bed. That's probably the most common thing people will describe. And though the name shadow people is a more recent thing, these types of stories have dated back hundreds of years. I remember when I first started experiencing sleep paralysis, I read a quote from Geezer Butler, bassist for the originators of heavy metal music, Black Sabbath, who described his inspiration for the band's opening track on their very first album, Black Sabbath, having woken up seeing this dark figure standing at the end of his bed. I remember reading that and being like, that sounds kind of like what happens to me sometimes. The 2015 documentary The Nightmare explores sleep paralysis with a heavy emphasis on these shadowy figures that people claim to see, so if you're interested, I think it's well worth a watch.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have wolves. Okay, this is a story that reflects the first time I heard about astral projection, my immediate fear and worry I had about it. Not returning to your body when you want. They start off the story by writing that their experience started off normally. They flew through their bedroom window and there was a man in their backyard drinking a beer by a fire pit. The storyteller joins them for a drink, they talk like old friends, there were some other entities, but everything was just good vibes. Then they wrote, quote, "All of a sudden I see 3 wolves come in from the backyard with strange freaky looking masks and they say, 'Do you all want to play a game?' As soon as they said that, I said hell no to myself and quickly went to snap back to my body." They then explained that despite every other projection experience they've had being able to return directly towards their body whenever they wanted, this time it was different. They were back in their body but they couldn't wake up. They couldn't move. They then explained that once they were finally able to wake up fully, they saw little dark spots and felt like they weren't fully back from the astral plane into the physical one. Now, the next time they went to project, the wolves were still in the backyard waiting to see if they were coming out again, so they probably smartfully decided against it. In our number 9 spot today, we have 11 Days. This is a story that comes from a Reddit user, and the short of it is really summed up well in the caption, quote, "I accidentally had an astral projection that lasted 11 full days in my mind." Okay, we're off to quite the start. Basically, this person starts off by explaining that this isn't the first time they've accidentally astral projected. Like the other day I accidentally slipped and fell on ice. I don't know how people are out here accidentally having an out-of-body experience, but I guess some people just have more interesting lives than me. So basically this projection starts out with this person being in a cemetery. They didn't have a body and instead they were just floating around. Then a sort of guardian spirit appeared and told them that they had a job they needed to do. They then spent 3 days digging in a cave and ended up digging a skeleton out of the ground, and once that was dug up, then they were no longer floating around and they suddenly had a body. From then on, this person and the spirit went walking through the forest having long conversations about the person's life, and the spirit told them what would later happen to them in their life and answered a bunch of questions the person had for them. The final moment of the projection was when, on the last day, they arrived at a waterfall. The spirit allowed the person to play in the beautiful area for 3 hours and remarked how it was sad that they couldn't stay. After this, the spirit told them it was time to go and they woke up again. They end off their story by saying that they weren't able to see the spirit's face, and while he told this person his name, they couldn't remember it as soon as they woke up. This left them with a distinct impression that they weren't supposed to know or remember these things. In our number 8 spot today, we have Breathe. This story is one that the poster called an odd experience, but I'm not gonna lie, when I read it, it was the one single story that got me kind of intrigued into the idea of projection. I don't think I'm gonna try it anytime soon, but I'll admit, it sounded kind of inviting. They wrote, quote, "So I was laying in bed last night and decided I wanted to try an astral project. I was just laying there and kinda came up with my own meditation technique when something kinda strange but really stimulating happened. Both my body and mind were still awake, so I don't know if I call this was me about to astral project or what. Suddenly my body felt really light but heavy at the same time. Also, it was like a new energy that I've never felt. I've also never breathed better in my life. So I'm asking if anyone knows what this was. I mean, I definitely can't say what this was, but it Sounds kinda cool. There's just something about the idea of being able to breathe better that I want to experience. Can anybody tell me if that's normal to astral projection? Maybe that's what's gonna get me into it. In our number 7 spot today we have The Beginner. This is an astral projection story that I guess shows an experience that is fairly common for beginners. They wrote about how they began with having sleep paralysis. They wrote, quote, "Wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I know it's all hallucinations. I didn't see anything, but it sounded like there was something scratching at my window. I closed my eyes and floated upwards. Again, I closed my eyes but could still see me passing stuff, but eventually I was in a black place. So I opened my eyes as an experiment and boom, back in my body. This happened before when I attempted an astral projection out of a lucid dream. Same deal." So it appears as though they are capable of the projection but are just having trouble seeing. This probably isn't the most wild story on this list, but it is still quite interesting to see how people have different experiences and that sometimes it can be based on your experience level. In our number 6 spot today we have The Child. This story is about a very strange astral projection experience someone had. They wrote, quote, "I was having normal lucid dreams all over the place and I came back home right over my body and could see myself and the blanket I was sleeping under. Right as I began watching myself sleep, I felt something bite me. And in the dream, I lifted up my blanket and a small child crawled out and I told it to get the heck out and it ran out the front door. I then woke up in real life. Weirdest AP of my life. Just had to share it here." They then go on to ask Reddit if anyone else has ever been touched or hurt while astral projecting and had it actually hurt in their physical body. This seems like a super terrifying experience, but I also think bizarre is the perfect word for it as well. I definitely don't think the person this happened to was expecting it. I honestly don't know much about astral projection, so I wonder what this all could mean. In our number 5 spot today we have The Fall. This story is about someone who had a negative astral projection experience, but they said it was still a fairly light-hearted one, which is always good. They wrote about how they went to bed early, so they tried some meditation to help them as they wanted to either lucid dream or astral project. I find this so funny because I absolutely hate dreams. I think sleep should be peaceful. I don't want to be thinking about stuff. I want to be left alone. Any day I wake up and can't remember my dreams from the night before is a great morning for me. So maybe I don't understand the desire, but I still think it's cool. They then go on to say that after this, once they had fallen asleep, they woke up every 2 hours and at one point they felt like they were awake but that their body was still asleep. They then tried to roll out of bed / out of their body and it worked, but maybe a little too well. Their projection self fell out of bed and hurt their hip, and it actually physically hurt them, which in the end returned them to their body. They end up saying it's no hard feelings, something that they just kind of laughed off. It was just surprising and kinda silly. In our number 4 spot today we have The Sudden Projection. This Reddit story starts off with the person explaining that normally when doing some sort of astral projection work, it takes them about an hour or so to build up the vibrations that lead them to the breakthrough. It takes time for them and isn't really something that happens suddenly. They then go on to explain that the night prior to their posting they were just trying to head off to sleep when all of a sudden they saw brightness behind their eyelids and felt vibrations throughout their whole body. They wrote, quote, "I felt spinning and weightless almost immediately after. Meanwhile, that brightness was a pure fuzzy bright white light with a grayish flickering circle in the middle of my sight, which appeared to have, for lack of a better word, lightning strikes all over the place. That circle with the lightnings or cracks started rotating very fast and 2 even brighter spots appeared to the left and right of it, and I felt accelerating. They then leaned into the feeling it kept accelerating until what they described as breaking through the circle and a typical, quote, sonic boom sound. After this, their destination slowly started appearing to them, but it was slowly loading, almost like a video game, and it was black and white or grayscale. This was sadly the end of what they can remember from their sudden, accidental astral projection. In our number 3 spot today we have The Smile. This is a story that comes from someone who marked this as a negative astral projection experience. They wrote, quote, "About 30 minutes ago I decided to try astral projection again since I hadn't done it in a long time, but had a very non-pleasant experience. I went about the usual methods, simply entering a meditative state. Before I had assumed it didn't work, so I opened my eyes, and I was trapped in my body. I tried to lift myself, but to no avail. For some reason, I felt myself smiling widely, almost like my mouth was stuck that way, and despite my best efforts, I could not change its position. I began to hear a woman's whisper, and I would hear familiar instrumentals to songs. I felt like something was trying to enter me, like it was going through my nose, so I demanded it to leave, and it did. I went to check my phone, but it wouldn't work. For some reason, I had two, but I do not own two. Honestly, I don't even know where to start. This sounds absolutely terrifying, but also the most random collection of things. Some of the people responding to this story suggested that perhaps it was sleep paralysis, but there are also people discussing how the presence felt might have been some part of their consciousness that they had previously tucked away. In our number 2 spot today, we have the shockwave. This story is about a negative experience someone had, and they were posting it in the hopes of finding someone who could give them a little guidance as they were feeling really unsure about the entire thing. They wrote, quote, "I was going through different eras full of beautiful sounds and ended up in complete darkness. There was a pinpoint of light, tiny. I pulled away as I feared it. As I pulled back to reality, it shocked my entire body. I convulsed. I was awake, but my consciousness was not with me. Every time I tried to move, I got vertigo, laid back down, and my body made me go back. I saw the light again. Boom, shocked my body again. I jumped. My heart raced as I was terrified. I was going 1,000 miles an hour or faster. I fought it and pulled myself out, zapped again once more. I was able to stay awake at this point, but I was done at the point with no desire to go back. Is this normal? What are your experiences? Personally, this entire list is about stuff I have never experienced at all, so it's tough for me to say what's normal and what's not. If you're more familiar, maybe you can let us all know down in the comments. This sounds thrilling and terrifying, but is it a typical experience? In our number 1 spot today, we have the entity. Honestly, I am getting surprised at how many people somehow accidentally astral project. This is another one of those stories, and they wrote, quote, "I've been curious about astral projection on and off for years now, but never fully committed. I've had a few accidental lucid dreams too, but I never got the full hang of it. This morning I woke up, scrolled on the phone for a bit, then fell back asleep, but I felt like I was in a sleep paralysis, but in a different room, which was strange, so I thought maybe I could try it and see where I am. My body started feeling weightless, like as if I were flying, but I couldn't see anything but this blank wall that resembles the wall in my room, but it's blank. The walls in my room all have decorations and posters. I started seeing a human figure in the wall that started smiling at me, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It felt like it was saying the words 'fall' to me, and it just kept saying it angrily. Then my body started feeling like it was actually falling, but I was still trapped in my bed. My blanket felt heavier. The only thing I could do was to breathe and just try practicing meditation, hoping I would calm down and get out. In this space I was in, I felt like I was able to slowly scoot out of the blanket, then I woke up." That sounds absolutely terrifying. I can't even imagine. I know this was accidental, but that definitely would have been enough for me to never project again. I want in my body experiences only after that.
Starting us off at number 10, Julia. In 2008, Dr. Richard Gallagher, a psychiatrist and professor at the New York Medical College, revealed a haunting case of demonic possession. Now, it is a little unusual for a medical professional to be the backer, as usually they are prone to associate the symptoms with mental health disorders, but Julia was a special case. Dr. Gallagher said she would change her voice drastically out of nowhere, from a high-pitched squeal to a deep, manly guttural sound. She was known to speak in tongues and reveal personal knowledge about others in the room that had never been divulged to her. Often she would levitate off the ground and was even able to throw objects across the room with her mind. At a loss for what to do, Dr. Gallagher even attempted calling in a priest to perform an exorcism, but this made matters even worse, as it clearly bothered the entity possessing Julia, with the demon saying they will be sorry for their actions to try and get rid of it. Apparently Julia continues to display signs of possession to this day and terrifies all that try to fix her condition. Next up at number 9, Clara Germana Seeley. In 1906, a South African girl began terrifying her family after one fateful night when she was allegedly possessed by a demonic entity. Now, no one knows just what happened that night, but the next day she began to exhibit superhuman strength and throwing nuns around the room with a simple flick of her wrist, while making inhuman noises. Clara would speak in languages she was not known to have any knowledge of, and after a 2-day exorcism where she floated several feet in the air and attempted to strangle the priest, she was finally freed from the demon. Let's just hope that the demon died and didn't get passed along to anyone else. Next up at number 8, sleepless nights. The year was 2011, the time was 3 a.m., and this Reddit user was lying in bed when out of nowhere they lost complete control of their limbs. They could speak, they could see, but their body was being jerked around all over the place. They said their feet and fingers were tapping, shoulders couldn't stop shrugging, and when they asked into the empty room if anyone was there, their right hand raised into the air and gave a thumbs up. With no control to stop it, they just laid there hoping and praying the demon would leave their body. And luckily for whoever this was, by morning whatever had possessed them seemed to be gone for good. Let's just hope that whatever it was doesn't come back with a vengeance. Coming in at number 7, sleep talker. While some seem to have chalked up this haunting encounter to sleep talking, Reddit user Adventure Time believes he was possessed and has no recollection. He says his girlfriend told him she awoke just before 3 a.m. because he wouldn't stop picking up his head to look out the window. When she asked him what was wrong, all he said was to go back to sleep. He was speaking in a strange voice unlike his own, and when she asked him things like when was his birthday or his parents' names, he couldn't answer. His girlfriend asked if he was going to hurt her, to which he replied no, but when asked if he would protect her, he stayed silent, creeping her out even further. She detailed that her boyfriend kept repeating that all would be done at 3 a.m. and just as promised, as soon as the clock struck 3, he went right to sleep with no memory of the haunting event, but truly terrified that whatever it was that possessed him that night might just return, and this time might not be so kind. Coming in at number 6, the green aura man. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? It's this awful phenomenon where essentially you are fully awake and conscious but unable to move or speak. And if that wasn't bad enough, some experience what has been coined as a sleep paralysis demon. And one Reddit user claims that she was possessed by one of those very entities. At 3 a.m., the demon with a green aura smiled at her, and then suddenly she began to feel very angry. The anger lasted days, and she began to feel violent towards her boyfriend. When she went to tell her boyfriend she needed help, she heard the spirit speak to her saying, "You wanted to see me, so here I am. Look at me." She apparently sought out the help from her grandmother, but nothing else about her is known. Was she able to free herself from the demon, or does she remain trapped and possessed to this day? Coming in at number 5, a real life Annabelle. Like something out of a horror movie, this husband and wife paranormal investigation team claims that they have a Raggedy Ann doll that is possessed. Their wild claim came after video surveillance footage from 3 in the morning showed the doll moving out of its display cabinet and flipping over a Ouija board. Lee and Lindsay run a museum of haunted objects from their home, and while there, Lindsay has felt things grab her by the neck and even witnessed objects flying across the room. The doll, which they acquired in 2019, is an identical copy of the notorious Annabelle doll from the 1970s that's inspired the Conjuring series, and they believe their doll to be possessed, just as that one is believed to be. According to the couple, after they received the doll, they were in a nearly fatal car crash, and on a separate occasion, Lindsay was hospitalized for nearly a week, with doctors having no clue what was wrong with her. Sounds to me like they have a demon living in their house, so let's just hope they can get rid of it before it's too late. Coming in at number 4, the Perron family. This family was actually the inspiration for the Conjuring series, but sadly their fate is much darker than the films. Just like any good horror movie, it all started with a beautiful, too good to be true house. After only a few nights there, the mother, Carolyn, began seeing the ghost of a woman who had taken her own life in the house and became very afraid. The family decided to enlist the help of paranormal investigators who came to perform a seance, but unfortunately things took a turn when they uncovered the dark history of their home. Previously it was owned by a witch who sacrificed her firstborn to Satan and then took her own life to complete the ritual, and then out of nowhere, Caroline became possessed by the spirit, writhing and screaming while her whole family watched in horror. Allegedly, the investigators tried to exorcise the demon out of the mother, but unfortunately were not able to, and the father kicked them out of the house. Unable to move due to financial constraints, the family remained and were haunted for the next several years by the demonic entity, scarring them for life. Coming in at number 3, camping trip disaster. Now, no names were mentioned for this story, so to make it easier, I'm gonna make them up. One night on a camping trip with a few other friends, one friend, let's call her Megan, witnessed what she can only describe as a demonic possession. After a long day, the group got ready for bed and all climbed into their tent. Megan awoke in the middle of the night to find one of her friends, let's call her Sarah, standing up in the corner of the tent, slapping her arms hysterically to her sides in a trance-like state, while maniacally laughing and crying simultaneously. Sarah began to examine her body like she'd never seen it before, and Megan, creeped out, tried to ignore it and went back to sleep. The next morning all seemed to be fine, but that night things got creepy again. Sarah and Megan were out for a walk when Megan witnessed the switch in her eyes as she creepily smiled at her and said, "I'm not listening," before crawling around on all fours and taunting Megan the whole night. Terrified, Megan ran away before the demon could get to her, and although she has remained in contact with Sarah, trying to get her help, she refuses to see her in person since the horrifying weekend. Next up at number 2, Robbie Mannheim. Robbie Mannheim was actually the real-life inspiration for The Exorcist. In the 1930s, when Robbie was just 13 years old, he decided he wanted to contact his deceased aunt. Now, he made 2 very bad decisions. 1, he did so in the middle of the night, and 2, he used a Ouija board. Now, not long after his 3 a.m. seance, strange things started happening to Robbie. Furniture would dart across the house, religious art on the walls would vibrate or fall when he walked by, and classmates even reported his desk flying across the room. Priests eventually agreed to perform an exorcism on the boy, but the demon was not so keen to leave. Allegedly, he attacked the priests with superhuman strength when they tried to free him of the spirit, but thankfully the priests won this one and the demon was expelled. So, moral of the story is, stop messing around with Ouija boards, especially if it's the middle of the night. You might not be as lucky as Robbie. And last up, in our number 1 spot, Michael Taylor. Back in 1974, a beloved family man without any previous criminal history seemed to suddenly change overnight into a different person. After the fateful night, he was all of a sudden flirting with a woman at his church, and after she turned him down, he became extraordinarily violent. It was so out of character for Michael that the church decided to exorcise him, believing that he was possessed. They strapped him down and allegedly exorcised a whopping 40 demons from his body, but it would turn out that that wasn't enough, as still 3 demons remained inside him. That night, Michael brutally killed and dismembered his wife and dog, and upon being arrested, told the police he was possessed by a force compelling him to destroy everything living within his house. He was sent to a psychiatric facility, but it seems like those last 3 demons remained attached to the man for the rest of his life.
Starting off this countdown, we have Nazu. Sometimes otherwise known as Druge, is the demon of death and decay. She takes the form of a fly and has a field day when someone dies. Right after death, after the soul has left the corpse, Nazu infests the body. The body instantly becomes contaminated and will start to decay. And if someone comes in contact with that corpse as it's decaying, Nazu will attack and infect them as well. So it's believed that no one should ever carry a corpse on their own, for if they do, Nazu will, and I quote, emerge from the nose, the eye, the tongue, the sexual organs, and the hinder parts of the deceased, and she will rush upon the corpse barrier and stain him, even to the end of the nails. And then that person is infected by her, and they need to be separated from everyone else and live the rest of their life in isolation. Nazu has also been known to attack dogs. Like hell no, stay away from my furry friends. Anyways, this is one nasty demon you never want to come in contact with. In our 9th spot today we have Lamia, and if you guys are liking this video so far, then smash that like button for me. Lamia is an extremely violent, ancient, and powerful demon. In Greek mythology, she was the queen of Libya and was known for murdering every little innocent kid she could get her hands on. It all started when she had an affair with Zeus. When Zeus's wife Hera found out about this, she forced Lamia to eat her own offspring from her affair with Zeus. Disgusting. But due to this, she had permanent insomnia, so Zeus was all like, I can help you, and then literally removed her eyes. It's so messed up.
She then went on to eat hundreds of others. This demon was also featured in the movie Drag Me to Hell. In the movie, it hunts down souls and takes them to hell. You know, drags them down, just as the title suggests. This demon is summoned by a curse that, when activated, will torture its victims for 3 days before it opens a portal to hell and drags them down. This demon also has the ability to alter reality, and it fills its victim's head with gruesome illusions. It can not only possess humans, but also animals. Literally, imagine trying to sleep. She would make you experience the worst of the worst dreams. And then eventually you'd just be driven to madness. Moving on to number 8, we have Amon. This guy is pretty terrifying. He commands 40 legions of evil spirits, basically to do the dirty work for him. In the Lesser Keys of Solomon, he is referred to as great in power and most strong. I think the visual description of him though makes him even more terrifying. He is just all over the place. He is said to have the shape of a wolf, but with a serpent's tail and a mouth that vomits fire. Not only that though, he can also turn into an old man. But not just any old man, no. An old man with a crow head and dog teeth. Like, what the actual hell? Who the heck designed this dude? It's like it was done by an 8-year-old kid that combined all of his favorite animals together or something. In our 7th spot, we have the Night Demon. The Night Demon, or Popo Bawa, is known to haunt the Tanzanian people of Pemba in the Indian Ocean. And apparently, it's a shapeshifter. It can turn into a bat, other times it can look quite human, or it can just turn into different animals. This demon is said to visit homes at night and attack anyone in the household. It would go house to house attacking families all throughout the night. In fact, a number of real-life attacks happened and they were blamed on this demon. As a result, men were staying awake to defend their house, even camping outside their house in groups. Others smeared themselves with pig's oil, thinking this would prevent the demon from attacking them. In 1997, apparently a farmer named Majaka Hamid, who didn't believe in this demon, actually got attacked by it. He was outside and said he couldn't see it, but he felt it. All of a sudden he felt this terrible pain in his ribs, as if someone was squeezing him and attempting to crush him to death. He believes that this was the demon attacking him. In our 6th spot, we have Pazuzu. Good old Pazuzu. He's the main antagonist of the Exorcist franchise. He is a demon based on the mythological figure in ancient Mesopotamian religion. In Mesopotamian religion, it is said to be the king of demons of the wind and is the bearer of storms and drought. He is often depicted as a creature with the body of a man, head of a lion, and tail of a scorpion. He is also shown with talons and wings, completely different from how he's depicted in the film. Now, Pazuzu in the Exorcist films ended up possessing individuals and makes them very violent. I'm sorry, did you see how Regan turned out in the Exorcist movie? She looked horrifying and gross. This dude is nasty and evil. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Zozo, who in fact might be a real demon. Users of Ouija boards would know this demon is someone you need to be scared of and need to look out for. So on March 24th, 2009, the presence of Zozo first came to light when a man named Darren Evans shared his interactions with Zozo online. He was playing with a board when he contacted a spirit who called itself Zozo. At first, according to Evans' account, the interactions with him were seemingly harmless. He experienced noises, moving objects, and flickering lights. He thought nothing of it. Then he started getting scratches and bruises on his skin. During one session with Zozo, Evans had to rush into the bathroom where his girlfriend was giving their daughter a bath. His girlfriend was gone, the tub was overflowing, and his daughter was drowning. He believes that Zozo was behind this. Now you see, tons of other people have then come forward and claimed that they have also come in contact with a spirit that calls itself Zozo. It is said to target mentally unstable and vulnerable users. Zozo has even been linked to a number of murders and people that have taken their own lives. In fact, this entity dates back to 1816. It is mentioned in the book Dictionnaire Infernal by Colin de Plancy. This book tells the story of a young girl who gets possessed by 3 demons: Minnie, Capulet, and Zozo. It's said that if Zozo reveals itself while you're using an Ouija board, then you gotta end the session immediately before you become its next victim. So can we all agree that this demon is horrifying and should never be messed with? Moving on, at number 4 we have Incubus. The Incubus is a male demon that preys on young women in their sleep. He visits them in their dreams and tries to engage in sexual activities with them. One of his goals is to impregnate the women, who then will give birth to its demon baby. There have been a number of real stories of women being visited by this demon in their sleep. They have woken up in the middle of the night and have felt the incubus demon holding them down. Others have seen a blurry silhouette of this demon on them while feeling it caress their body. But no matter what you do, you can't move, you can't get it off of you, you're just stuck there. In fact, sleep paralysis is widely considered to be the work of the incubus and succubus demons. In our third spot we have the succubus demon. So I talked about incubus, it's time to talk about the female counterpart, succubus. Succubus dates back to medieval times. It's a demon that can transform themselves into attractive females to seduce men and engage in sexual activity with them. Then it's said that they can eat a man's soul, or if the men are repeatedly visited by her in their dreams, then she can cause death. Again, just like the incubus demon, a lot of people have said that they have been visited by a succubus demon in their dreams. They're unable to move, but feel this demon on their body, taking advantage of them. In our second spot we have Mara. In Old Norse, Mara is a demon that would sneak into people's rooms at night and sit down on their bodies. By doing so, it would plague their mind with bad dreams. Mara was also sometimes referred to as Mora or mares, which comes from the word nightmares. Whoever got visited by this demon would wake up unable to move with that heavy feeling in their chest from Mara resting on them, which is why she's often associated with sleep paralysis as well. It was also believed that witches could send Mara to anyone they wanted to torment. According to one story, a Norwegian king was sent one night and the demon crushed his legs and then proceeded to press down on his head and kill him. Yikes. Typically, Mara is depicted as being tall and very skinny. Like, you can see her bones through her skin. She's got massive long arms that she can use to hold you down, and she's got nasty little raggedy hair. I never knew this, but apparently there's a 2008 movie called Mara, and it's all about this sleep demon, and now I kinda wanna watch it. And in our number 1 spot today we have Beelzebub. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me. I swear I always think of Bohemian Rhapsody when I hear this demon's name, so is it just me? Let me know in the comments below, it's probably just me. Okay, so Beelzebub's name literally translates to Lord of the Flies. As a result, he is often depicted as an evil fly or as a man with wings. In Christian texts, the name Beelzebub is often associated with the devil himself. They would alternate between using this name and Satan. He is considered one of the 7 princes of hell, and he is associated with the sin gluttony. Now, Beelzebub actually had a huge influence on the Salem witch trials, which is what he's probably most famous for. He was blamed for possessing the souls of those who were accused of being witches. He's also said to be responsible for several demonic possessions. The most famous case being Annalise Michel, a devout Catholic woman who is said to have been possessed by 5 different demons. As a result, she underwent 67 exorcisms to try and get Beelzebub and the other demons out of her body. This demon also possessed a woman named Nicole Aubry. She was possessed by 30 spirits from 1565 to 1566. When a priest cast Beelzebub out of her body, a cloud of black smoke came out of her. And lastly, we have Father Louis Godfredi. He was also possessed by this demon and ended up getting burned at the stake in 1611. When he was set on fire, a swarm of flies flew out of his body. Yeah, no thanks, that's horrifying.
Alright, coming in at number 10 now, we have Kenneth Parks. This is the incredible story of a man whose depression triggered a horrifying sleepwalking event. Early in the morning of May 23rd, 1987, this Toronto man got up, he got in his car, he drove 10 miles to the house of his parents-in-law and attacked them. He killed the mother, but the father survived. He then handed himself in at the nearest police station, very dazed and confused. He had no memory of the event and no motive to do it at all. He got on really well with them. A team of psychologists argued in court that he was sleepwalking and he was acquitted of murder. Was he really sleepwalking? And even if he was, Does that make it okay? Next up at number 9 we have Rachel Ward. In May 2009 this 18-year-old British student got up, put on a jacket and then just sleptwalked out of her bedroom window, falling 25 feet to the ground. She landed feet first right next to her car and quickly collapsed. Amazingly, she was not really fully awake at this point and was only semi-conscious. Rachel started to scream for help. Her parents found her and took her straight to the hospital. They feared the worst, but doctors were amazed to find that she had not broken a single bone in her body. What might be even more amazing though is that after all of this, she didn't wake up properly until the next day. I'm sure that was a very interesting catch-up chat between her and her parents. Coming in at the number 8 spot now, we have the email. In 2005, the story emerged of a 44-year-old woman who woke up and started sending emails in her sleep. She turned on the computer, logged in, and started sending strange messages to all of her contacts. They were written in a mix of upper and lowercase letters and made absolutely no sense at all. One of them read, "Come tomorrow and sort this hellhole out. Dinner and drinks, 4 PM. Bring wine and caviar only." Another email simply said, "What the?" That was it. This story helped to popularize the term mailing because so many people were starting to do it back then. What's going to happen next? Are we going to have people sleep Snapchatting? Sleep YouTubing? I hope I don't upload one of these videos while I'm sleepwalking. Am I sleepwalking now? I don't know. Alright, moving on to number 7 now, we have the lawnmower. In 2005, an incredible story emerged about a woman called Rebecca Armstrong who woke up one night to find her husband Ian mowing the lawn completely naked. The noise of the lawnmower had woken her up. She watched in disbelief and decided to not wake him up because she had heard it's dangerous to wake up a sleepwalker. Instead, she simply unplugged the electric mower. He then continued to mow the lawn without actually mowing it. The next day, Ian didn't believe her, but he quickly accepted it as true, presumably because there's no way you would make up something this weird. It's just too weird. At least put some clothes on, Ian. Alright, next up at number 6 we have the card game. This story comes from Reddit user Irrepressible87 who said that one night when he was 11 his dad came home late from work and saw him in his room sitting cross-legged on the bed with his fingers spread as if he was holding cards. His dad said hello but then realized the whole room was dark and his eyes were closed. Despite this, he still looked at his dad and then said out loud, "Every time I play this game, I get my kicked." As soon as that last word came out, he slumped and collapsed out of bed and onto the floor. Kinda makes you wonder how many weird things the dad didn't see. Coming at number 5 now, we have turtles. Reddit user Amphibiology29 said that when she first married her husband, she woke up one night to find him gone from their bed and a metal rattling sound coming from the bathroom. She could see through the cracks in the door that the bathroom was pitch black. She knocked on the door and asked if he was okay and if she could come in. He said yes. She opened the door to find he had taken the shower curtain down ring by ring and was halfway through taking the blinds down on the window. She asked him what exactly he was doing and he calmly replied, "Because this is what Ninja Turtles are made from." It was then and only then that she realized he was sleepwalking, presumably because Ninja Turtles are made of turtles, obviously. Coming at number 4 now, Hannah Abdiel had a terrifying sleepwalking experience and remembers the nightmare that came with it. In the dream, she met her doppelganger, a girl who looked exactly like her but slightly better in every way. The girl looked into Hannah's eyes and said, "When you dream, you're in my world. I want to live in your world. I want to trade places with you." Hannah grabbed her cell phone and began backing out of her apartment with her eyes on the girl. Suddenly, a black shape exploded from a closet and she ran out the front door and then heard a gravelly voice say, "Where you going, Dolly?" The black shape then finally caught her, waking her from her dream. She found that she had sleptwalked the whole thing and woke up in a crumpled heap on the staircase with her cell phone gripped in her hand. Alright, at number 3 now, we have the crystal ball. This one comes from Reddit user Steezer, who said that he is no stranger to sleepwalking, but one story stands out above the rest. One night his girlfriend woke up to see him standing on the end of the bed with his hand around the ceiling light bulb like this. He was moving them around as if the light bulb was some sort of crystal ball. Needless to say, his girlfriend was very freaked out and tried to stop him, but instead he kept saying, "Shh, don't touch it. It will fly away." That is, obviously, insanely weird. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at that one. maybe both. Next up at number 2 now, we have the cold. In January 2009, a 51-year-old man from Wisconsin sleptwalked out of his house in sub-zero temperatures and walked into the night. His body was found the next morning 190 yards from his house. Hypothermia was the cause of death. Investigators were astonished that someone could sleepwalk so hard that not even deathly cold could wake them up from it. They suspect it may have had something to do with the medication he was taking at that time. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the chef. Robert Wood is a retired chef who quit his day job and it kind of turned into a night job. Despite being retired for years, he used to get out of bed, go to his kitchen and just prepare entire meals. Stir fries, omelets, spaghetti bolognese, you name it, he cooks it in his sleep. This can happen up to 4 or 5 times in a single night. At first it started out as a bit of a joke, but eventually the couple did become concerned. They were only getting a few hours of sleep and were also worried that he could start a fire without realizing. His wife said that although the food looked amazing, she has never eaten it. I hate when food goes to waste, so I can't imagine waking up to find that I've cooked and wasted half of the contents of my fridge. Poor Robert.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Demon Leader. This Reddit user claims that he was visited by a strange and powerful demon woman in his dreams. He claims that the dream started off with him being in a room full of praying women. That's when a strange woman in a dark cloak appeared. He knew that the woman was not human. He could sense her evil presence. He then called her out in front of everyone saying she's a demon. I mean, I don't think that's the smartest thing to do, but The woman then approached him and took off her cloak, revealing that she was an old, wrinkly woman with dark, evil eyes. From there, she looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I can't wait to see you hanging from your neck." He claims that when he woke up, he had pain all around his neck. He also claims that every so often he will experience waves of darkness where he envisions hanging himself. He thinks that this demon is latched onto him and is trying to control him. That's terrifying. And in our ninth spot, we have Succubus. So this individual believes that they were haunted by the succubus demon in their dreams. Basically, succubus dates back to medieval times. It's a demon that can transform themselves into attractive female to attract men. Then it's said that they can eat a man's soul, or if the men are repeatedly visited by her in their dreams, then she can even cause death. So the Reddit user Yamhead14 posted this dream. He said that it was a very vivid dream that took place in a scary abandoned warehouse. That's when this demon woman arrived and tried to seduce him. He said that she looked attractive, but he knew something was off with her. She tried to force herself on him, but he ended up fighting her off and escaped. When he woke up, he researched about his dream and found images of the demon that looked just like the lady from his dream. Before then, he had never even seen or heard of this demon. What's freaky is how another Reddit user commented on the post saying that he too had an identical dream that also took place in a warehouse with the same demon. Could it be that she is a real demon trying to find her next victim? In our eighth spot, we have the Dark Demon. This next woman claims that she has had super lifelike encounters with demons in her sleep. One night she was sleeping on her couch when she woke up to a small shadow hovering over her. Suddenly her eyes were forced shut and she couldn't open them. Then she felt this demon pacing back and forth beside her. She claims that it was heavy since every step that it took, it shook the couch. She also said that she could feel his anger radiating off of him. After some time, he finally spoke and said, "Why can't you just follow me?" She said that she swears that this was a real encounter and not just a dream. She truly felt this demon's presence. Making our way down the list at number 7, we have the demonic ritual. This next woman had a dream where she was participating in a satanic ritual in an old house. She said that all the other people also involved in this ritual had blurry faces. They were all in a circle and were chanting in unison and also contorting their bodies. When the ritual was over, her vision went entirely gray. But she saw figures in white robes entering through the windows and doors. But they weren't human. Their eyes were entirely black. Each figure chose one of the participants and entered their body. The woman tried to fight back from this demon entering her body, but failed. Next thing she remembers is being in a trance and being controlled by this demon. She also claims that when she woke up, her whole body hurt. So could it be that in her dream she helped summon and release demons? Let's hope not. In our 6th spot, we have Babadook. This next individual claims that he is constantly haunted by a demon that eerily resembles Babadook. Babadook is a tall, pale-faced creature that torments its victims once they become aware of his reality. In his dreams, this Babadook-looking demon would float over his bed, slowly coming closer and closer to him. He would lock eyes with him, and this demon would always have this wide, evil grin plastered on his face. The individual remains helpless and frozen while the demon comes closer and closer. He is always overcome with negative feelings when this happens. He even claims that he can feel the demon's breath on his face. Then when the demon is inches away from his face, he disappears and he wakes up. This is a reoccurring dream for him. This demon just continues to haunt him. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the demon child. This next woman says that she is always tormented by a demon of a young girl with dark black eyes. She says that her dreams will start off pleasant, until the girl enters and forcibly drags her into a nightmare. She says that once this demon girl enters her dreams, then dark things start to happen, such as dead people will look in through her windows, or she'll end up watching her loved ones die, or she'll even see herself die. She says that while these nightmares unfold, the demon just stands there and watches it all. This woman is convinced that this little girl demon is responsible for all her bad dreams, since she's just always there when they happen. In our 4th spot, we have the dark figure. This man remembers having a dream where he woke up feeling lifeless, as if he just died. In his dream, he got out of bed and peered out from his bedroom to the hallway. That's when he saw a tall man standing there, staring at him. He said that this man was about 7 feet tall. He was wearing all black clothes, which consisted of big heavy boots, jeans, and a puffy jacket. The scariest part is that he had no face at all. He said that a dim blue light was illuminating the man's face, but he just had no facial features. His face was purely black. That's when he knew that this wasn't a human and it was indeed a demon. From there, he was frozen in place, stuck staring at this demon. He felt as if this demon was sucking away his soul. He claims that he practically saw it leaving his body. When there was nothing else left, he passed out. When he woke up from the dream, he felt very lightheaded and weak. My question is, who is this demon and why is he so fashionably dressed? In our 3rd spot, we have Lamia. This next individual claims that she was visited by the demon Lamia. In Greek mythology, Lamia was the queen of Libya who is known for murdering children. She's said to be an extremely violent and powerful demon. In her dream, she was walking down a black hallway. Everything was dark, but she could see a glow at the end of this long hallway. She had to feel her way along the sides of the walls to safely make it to the light, which was just one flickering candle. However, when she goes to pick up the candle, it's blown out. All of a sudden, her ears start to ring and burn. The walls shake and the candle she's holding relits to reveal Lamia standing inches from her face, screaming at her. She looks down and she's standing on a pile of dead bodies. She tries to run, but the bodies grab at her and scratch her arms and legs. When she woke up from her dream, her ears were still ringing. She also noticed that she was covered in a couple of bruises on her arms and legs that looked like marks from people grabbing her. Coming in our 2nd spot, we have the shadow demon. This next story comes from a man named Andrew from Ohio. He claims that for 2 weeks in a row, he started experiencing really vivid and dark dreams. In particular, he constantly dreamt about a shadow demon. He says that this demon was about 6 to 7 feet tall. His face was completely pale. He had no facial features. Slenderman. He said that the demon was wearing a long black trench coat with a black hat. His legs were super long. In his dream, the demon stands and just stares at Andrew. It then causes Andrew to burst into tears. He also says that this demon can climb up on the walls. What's scary is that apparently his dream came to life. One day he was in the kitchen talking to his mom when he saw the demon from his dream standing in front of the fridge. He immediately started panicking when he saw him, but when his mom turned to see what he was freaking out about, the shadow demon disappeared. So that's terrifying. His demon from his nightmares literally crossed over to the real world. And in our number 1 spot, we have the decaying body. This next individual probably had the worst dream and the scariest encounter with a demon, in my opinion. Because she was greeted by Bloody Mary. It just creeps me out saying her name. So basically, this woman fell asleep facing sideways, and she has a mirror facing her bed, so when she's laying on her side, she's just directly facing this mirror. That's when she woke up and she couldn't move her body at all. She felt like she was being forced to stare directly into this mirror. At first, she could just see herself, but slowly her appearance started to change.
She started to look disfigured and as if her body was decaying right in front of her. Then all of a sudden, Bloody Mary appears as a glowing figure in the mirror. She stands there staring right into her eyes. That's when the woman's eyes and nose started to bleed. Bloody Mary screams, the mirror cracks, and the woman wakes up from her dream. Scariest thing of all, she claims that that same night, her and her friends were drinking and fooling around and ended up playing the Bloody Mary game. There you go. Reason 110 why you should not play this game. Also, why is it considered a game? It's just absolutely terrifying. It's not fun at all.
Starting up at number 10 now, we have sleep paralysis. Some of you guys might have experienced this while others are hearing about it for the first time. Think yourselves lucky if that is you. Sleep paralysis is when a person's body is essentially sleeping but their mind is totally awake, aware of their surroundings but they are unable to move. If that's not terrifying enough for you, people who experience sleep paralysis often sense things in the room watching them, such as a shadowy figure. This dark entity could be in the corner of their eye, but they can never turn to look at it because they can't move their head. Terrifying. About 5% of people experience sleep paralysis regularly, and I feel very bad for them. Alright, moving on to number 9 now, we have sleepwalking murder. The proper term for this is homicidal sleepwalking, and it involves someone killing a person while they are sleepwalking. It really does happen. There have been over 70 recorded cases of it happening. One famous case involved Sergeant Willis Bowshears, a US airman who killed a girl in England in 1961 but claimed he was sleepwalking. He was acquitted of the crime and walked free. Do you guys think that's fair? Are you maybe now scared that one day you might do this too? Coming at number 8 now, we have exploding head syndrome. Now I had never heard about this until recently, and I kind of wish I still had never heard about it. It's a condition that people have where as they are falling asleep, they hear an insanely loud noise such as a bomb exploding, a gunshot, or a cymbal crash. They are totally imaginary and often very scary for the person to hear. Some people even experience flashing lights or a burning sensation on their body. Scary stuff, but what's even more scary is that the causes of it aren't known. Next up at number 7 now, we have hypnic jerks. Have you guys ever been drifting off to sleep and then suddenly you feel like you're falling and you have to like jump up and try to stop it? I'm sure a lot of you have. I definitely have. It's pretty scary. Scientists say it is linked to stress and anxiety levels, but also to caffeine and irregular sleep patterns. Other people say that it's the feeling of your soul being pulled back after an out-of-body experience. Either way, I would be happy if I never experienced a hypnic jerk again, but that is a good insult. Coming at number 6 now, we have the big question. Why do we sleep? It seems like an obvious question, doesn't it? But the truth is, we only have theories. Scientists who have dedicated their whole lives to studying sleep still can't give you a definitive answer on this. Some think it's to keep us inactive at night and hidden from predators. Others say it allows the body to repair itself and flush out toxins from the brain. We know from babies sleeping 14 hours a day that it has a huge involvement in how brains develop, but still we don't know why. We know that we need food for energy. We know that we need water for countless bodily functions. Why do we need sleep? Because we're tired isn't really an answer. It just creates more questions. And this brings us nicely onto our number 5 now, sleep deprivation. We might not know why we need sleep, but we know what happens if we are deprived of it, and it ain't pretty. Studies where humans only got 4 hours of sleep for 3 weeks straight show that their whole bodies started to shut down. At first they started to hallucinate, and then it seemed like they weren't even there at all. Physically, their heart, their immune and digestive systems began to break down. I found out that a man called Randy Gardner holds the world record for not sleeping at 264 hours. That's about 11 days. Please don't try to beat that, guys. Moving on to number 4 now, we have somniphobia. This is the fear of sleeping. I feel so sorry for people who have this. If you have a fear of spiders, you can try to avoid them. The same goes with other phobias such as heights or needles, but sleep, that's something we all have to do. People who suffer from somniphobia wake up after a restless night and they are instantly dreading the next night time. This can be triggered by other conditions either in or out of the person's control, but either way they always have that ticking clock in the back of their head, counting down the seconds until they have to sleep again. Next up at number 3 now, we have years of sleep. You will spend a third of your entire life sleeping. Over the course of an average human life, that amounts to 26 years of sleeping. That is pretty scary for some people. People tell you to seize the moment and live life to the fullest. Well, a third of your life is spent unconscious on a bed with a little bit of drool on your lip. Nice. In fact, this year alone, you will have spent a total of 4 months just sleeping. If you don't believe me, go and crunch the numbers for yourself. It is quite unsettling. Coming in at number 2 now, we have bed bugs. They always say, don't let the bed bugs bite, but that's kind of hard when they're like everywhere. The average home has about 100 bed bugs living in their beds, although really infested ones can have up to 150,000 or more. There are almost certainly some in your bed right now, I'm sorry to tell you. They live anywhere people sleep, and they feed on us by biting into our skin and sucking up our blood. And you know what's even scarier? It's only getting worse. Bedbug infestation used to be quite a rare thing in first world countries, but with each new spawn of them, their numbers are growing, one bed at a time. And finally at number 1 now, we have another life. Have you guys ever had a dream that felt like it lasted days? Well, how about an entire lifetime? There are many stories like this. I read a really scary one about a guy who went to sleep for 15 hours after a trip. During that time, he had a dream that spanned 17 years. He would wake up in the dream, he would live his normal day-to-day life, and then go back to sleep. For 17 years. He finished college, he went to law school, he got married, became a lawyer, and even moved house. He had friends and memories, good times and bad times. He even slept in the dream and had smaller mini dreams. When he finally woke up, he was terrified. It took him years to adjust to the fact that the life he knew had never even happened. It felt so real to him. That kind of makes you think, this life feels pretty real, doesn't it? Let's hope you don't wake up tomorrow and it wasn't all a dream. At number 10 now, we have the exorcism. This one comes from Reddit user Sleventeen, who said that they dreamt they arrived at their psychology class a few minutes late. The lights were all off except for a single projector. Everybody there was gathered around a table in the middle of the room that had a naked girl on it. She looked extremely ill. They walked to the table and they realized the girl was possessed. She nearly folded herself in half while the teacher examined her and performed an actual exorcism. The girl was shouting profanities the whole time in the devil's voice. She turned her head right around and started smiling at them. They woke up but then realized they were paralyzed, and then they saw the possessed girl on their own bedroom floor. She started saying things like, "Why are you watching me? What's so interesting? And are you scared?" All the while her head kept snapping in weird directions. They finally snapped out of it when they got out of bed and turned their light on, but sometimes they say they still think about it before bed. Okay, at number 9 now, we have the other me. Not my throwaway Nope said that she had a dream where she was walking around her university, and as she passed through the crowds, she came across herself. Like, actually herself. It was someone who looked just like her, and they were just standing there. She tried to talk to her, but there was no response at all, just a blank expression. But then her face began to contort and her skin started sliding off until all that was left was a skull and dangling flaps of skin. She screamed and ran. The skeleton chased her and she yelled for help, but everybody else just stood and watched. Nobody said a word. She finally escaped, but then her phone started vibrating. She looked down and it was a call from her own phone number. She answered it and all she heard on the other end was her own voice screaming in agony. As the phone hit the floor, she finally woke up. At number 8 now, Davey Wavy Baby said that one night he got really bad sleep paralysis. There was an old rocking chair in his room at the time, and as he fluttered between wake and sleep, he turned his head towards the chair. Sitting there was a woman, crying her eyes out, staring directly at him while she pulled her own insides out. She had grey skin and blonde hair. He tried closing his eyes to end it all, but then he felt a pressure on his chest. He opened his eyes to see her on his chest, pulling out his own guts while she kept crying and staring right into his eyes. Okay, at number 7 now, Emperor Tiberius 08 said that when they were 8 years old, they dreamt they were attending a funeral with their family. They were all standing around an empty casket, and he asked his auntie what was going on. She looked at him confused and said, "Don't you know? It's for you. You have a terminal illness and the doctor said you will be dead by now, so we had all of this arranged. We've spent too much money on it now, we have to bury you today. He immediately ran away until he got to a cliff and started climbing down it. There he met one of his own childhood friends who calmed him down and told him it's all going to be okay because they are going to die anyway. They climbed back up the cliff and their family closed the coffin on him, waking him up from the nightmare. Okay, at number 6 now we have The Breeze. One Redditor shared a story about a waking nightmare they kept having. Their eyes would flutter open and they would be staring at one side of their room. They would feel someone blowing on the back of their neck and they would start freaking out because they know that they locked their door that night, there should be nobody there. They roll over and face the other way, but they feel that same blowing on the back of their neck again. They roll over again and suddenly they are face to face with a mysterious dark hooded figure. When they try and scream, the figure snaps into the air and quickly floats backwards into their closet, where it sits there staring out at them until they fall back asleep. Coming out number 5 now, we have Kermit the Monster. This one is just straight up psychotic. Reddit user Beena said they had a nightmare where they walked into their grandma's kitchen and she was on the floor. Now to their horror, they realized the grandma was severed in half at the waist. She was bleeding and yelling. They look up and there on the side of the kitchen is Kermit the Frog. He has huge legs and he's standing next to a massive boiling pot. Inside of it are the grandma's legs. He turns around and looks them right in the eyes and with a bloody grin he says, "We're having grandma's legs tonight." And then he just keeps on laughing and laughing while the grandma screams out in pain. That is one of the most messed up things I've ever heard. Okay, at number 4 now we have Look After Her. Ian Spencer said that he has a recurring dream where he's in a dark field with a tree at the other end of it. As he walks towards the tree, he sees a young girl standing at the base of it. He gets closer and then he notices she is covered in gruesome scars and blood from head to toe. The closer he gets, the more blood and more scars appear, and then she makes eye contact with him and starts screaming that it's all his fault. She chases him back across the field, but when he gets to where he started from, he finds her parents. They are both standing there holding each other and they too are covered in blood and scars. They open their mouths and say, "All you had to do was look after her." And then he wakes up. Okay, moving on to number 3 now, we have tentacles. One Reddit user said they dreamt they were lying in bed when their feet started to itch. Suddenly, the skin started bubbling and spots began to appear. The spots grew and filled with pus, and then they realized they were growing into big, slimy tentacles. Yeah. 10, 15, 20, about 30 of them in the end, and they were painful. Each one kept thrashing about and then suddenly they died and dried out into just dead scabs. They felt like burnt wood and were still attached to their feet. They woke up with a gasp but said they could still feel the tentacles there for the next 2 days. Okay, at number 2 now we have the Easter Bunny. One Redditor said they dreamt the Easter Bunny would chase them around their town with big pink ears and a huge grin. They ran around the town trying to hide from him, but he would always catch them and tickle them. Apparently it was painful tickling. Then he would just let them go and they would hide again. Each time he would find them and tickle even harder. The Easter Bunny caught them one last time and then tickled them harder than ever. They tried to scream for them to stop but they couldn't, and they were eventually tickled to death. Yeah, I mean, that one might be a little bit funny if it wasn't so horrifying. And finally, number 1 now, one Redditor said they had a dream that they were running across a frozen over ocean filled with human corpses. Suddenly they heard a very loud shriek. They turned around to find themselves face to face with a skeletal flaming llama. That's a llama skeleton on fire, I guess. It slowly walked up to them, melting the ice around it, and whispered slowly in their ear, "Time to join the others." Presumably they meant the ocean of frozen corpses below them. It then screamed and chased them for the rest of the nightmare. Apparently the scariest part of this was that it had Morgan Freeman's voice. Weird.
3 a.m. doctors say the body's at low tide. The soul is out, the blood moves slow. You're the nearest to dead you'll ever be, saved from dying. Sleep is a patch of death, but at 3 in the morn, full wide-eyed staring is living death. And wasn't it true? He had read, somewhere more people die in hospitals than at any other time. Yes, I'm starting off this list with a scary 3 a.m. quote from Ray Bradbury from Something Wicked This Way Comes. And Something Wicked This Way Comes at number 10, we have the witching hour. Have you ever wondered why 3 AM is such a traditionally scary time? My friends, let me tell you about the witching hour. In folklore, the hour between 3 AM and 4 AM was considered a time for witches, demonic entities, and ghosts. They would roam free at their most powerful. Also known as the Devil's Hour, the time of night was thought to be a peak of supernatural activity, possibly because nobody was awake to pray. Any woman caught outside at this time of night, especially in the Middle Ages, was arrested on suspicion of witchcraft, unless they could provide a good reason. Simply roaming free because you felt like it was not a good enough reason in the Dark Ages, and many of the women who were caught out at night were executed for witchery. There may actually be a scientific explanation for all of the bad juju discussed in the witching hour folklore. It seems that, oddly, ghostly experiences and apparitions tend to happen between the hours of 2 AM and 4 AM, which includes the dreaded witching hour. It seems at this point of the night, the amount of melatonin in the body peaks, which could be a reason for the ominous occurrences. That or witches.
Number 9. Joe's Paranormal TV. If you have a paranormal YouTube show and you go looking through the woods at night, you're pretty much asking for trouble. You can't complain about it. It's like eating deep fried cheese and then complaining that you're constipated. It comes with the territory. Well, on Joe's Paranormal TV, one night he decided to go see what a creepy stretch of woods had to offer at 3 AM, and it didn't disappoint. While Joe is trekking through, we hear some strange metallic banging at what sounds like voices. It could be some friendly campers, or it could be a crazy metal pot man letting you know he's about to murder you and then cook you in the pot he was just banging with. Then he hears what sounds like a baby crying. If that wasn't enough, he comes to a clearing of what looks like a bunch of broken trees set in symbols. So this could be witches or a bear that was using them as a back scratcher. Either way, you probably shouldn't be hanging around the woods late at night if you want to keep all your limbs attached to your body.
Okay, so is anyone up for an urban legend? Next at number 8, we have the little baby ogre. I don't feel good about baby ogres. Behold this footage from a famous Japanese Kleenex tissue commercial.
It's a fine day, people open windows, they leave their houses just for a short while. They walk by the grass and they look at the grass, they look at the sky. It's going to be a fine night tonight.
Okay, child ogre. Creepy singing, sure, but this is Japan, land of the eel ice cream and game shows such as Happy Pie Hell. This is normal, right? Wrong. The story goes that after this commercial aired in 1986, everybody involved died or met a horrible end. Isn't dying meeting a horrible end? For example, the woman in the commercial was supposed to have birthed a baby of her own, but it turned out she died in childbirth. Further urban legends say that if you watch the video at 3 AM, the footage will warp and you'll become cursed. Some say it's 12 AM, but honestly, one person's 12 is another person's 3, literally if you live on different coasts of America. So why is it cursed? Well, apparently that little ditty she is singing is alleged to be a German folklore song with the lyrics in German saying, "Die, die, everybody's cursed, everyone will be killed." Good. Somebody allegedly caught the video changing and warping on camera. Have a watch.
It's a fine day, people open windows, they leave their houses.
Sorry, I might have cursed you there. What's a little curse between friends?
At number 7, we've got Tony McClusey's Black Bag. Sometimes it's the people you think you can trust that turn out to be the most dangerous. Yeah, next time someone close to you tells you that they'll love you and always be there for you, be like, oh, I'm onto you. I'm not getting my eyelids stolen from the skin bandit. Tony McClusey was caught on camera late at night pulling what looks like to be a black garbage bag out from his car and taking it to a place to be disposed. Now, what is in this big old garbage bag? Was it some biohazardous chemicals that needed to be disposed of very properly? Or maybe it was a wedding gift that he just couldn't bear to look at anymore after his divorce? How about his lovely sister Gemma? Tony McClusey chopped up his sister and stuffed her into garbage bags before secretly trying to dump her body. Luckily, he's very dumb and got caught on CCTV camera and sentenced to 20 years in prison for his horrible crimes. Apparently this was all over an argument, so next time you catch your roommate eating your Cheez-Its, maybe you should just let it go.
You don't know this, but when Che walks off after doing his bit, he clicks.
I click?
Yeah.
Every time?
Every time. Coming into number 6, we have the neighbor. There is an Ask Reddit thread which poses the question, what's the scariest thing that's happened to you at 3 AM? There are some pretty intense responses, some including like ghosty woasty stuff. But when I think about the reality of being met with some situations, reading this truly terrified me. River Tiberius wrote this last year and got 1.1 thousand upvotes. They wrote, this happened a year ago. My family was all asleep at 3 AM when I awoke to scratching at the front door. I peeked through the window to find a beaten, bloody young woman sitting cross-legged on my front step, staring back at me. She was looking me in the eye. It was my neighbor. Her left eye was swollen shut. She had a laceration on her head. I opened the door and tried to get her to come inside. She was extremely drunk and hardly wearing anything on this cold winter night. She was babbling and not making any sense. I called 911, but when she realized I was calling for help, she screamed in my face, climbed over my chain link fence and flopped to the ground. She ran down the street, flailing her arms, bleeding and screaming. I thought her boyfriend had beat her up. They hadn't been known for domestic violence issues. I came to find out that earlier that day she'd got rip-roaringly drunk and then tripped and hit her head on concrete. The laceration on her head actually had stitches in it already, which is why I couldn't see them in the dark. When she got home from the ER, she stole her roommate's whiskey and pounded most of the bottle. She then just went berserk. Jeez, that was a difficult read, poor girl. Honestly, it sounds like she was in a really bad place. It must have been even more terrifying to hear scratchings on the door, but then open it up and know the person who turns up out there. And seeing them like not acting like themselves like that, acting possessed, that's pretty scary. I really wonder how her story played out, but like, I hope she got better.
Number 5, we got Bad Choice Noah's Bad Choice. I mean, it shouldn't at all be a surprise that someone named Bad Choice Noah made it onto our list. That's like a guy who's named Fall Off Skateboard Pete being in a fail video. It's just gonna happen. Well, one night Noah decided that he was gonna try and feed his large collection of snakes at 3 AM with the lights off, only lighting the area with a small flashlight. He did this because he thought maybe he would catch something paranormal on camera. I guess the logic is that ghosts like snakes or something. While doing this, one of his snakes almost bites his hand and then escapes from its cage. This could have led to Snakes in a Dark Room, which is the horror sequel to Snakes on a Plane that the public has been begging for. I don't think he ran into any ghosts, but being in a dark room and nearly getting bitten by a massive snake and then having it set loose without Sam Jackson there to save you is enough to make it onto this list.
Coming into number 4, this actually truly scares me. We have sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is so nasty. Landon and I recently did a list where we mentioned it, and honestly, I think that those of us who have ever experienced it can all agree that it is the scariest thing to deal with. Seconds feel like hours and you're literally stuck, unable to move. Sometimes if your face is in your pillow, you'll feel like you can't breathe and you think this is going to be your life forever. Honestly, it's really horrible. On scanning the internet, it actually seems like, oddly enough, a lot of people experience sleep paralysis at, you guessed it, 3 AM. While we have a scientific explanation for the horror, a lot of cultures believe that the phenomenon is caused by ghosts. Yes, ghosts. They believe that a malevolent spirit sits on your chest at night while you're sleeping and literally tries to suffocate you. The legend is most prevalent in Cambodia, but Thailand have their own version called Fiam. They believe that the Fiam don't attack women, so a surefire way to combat the ghost and keep yourself safe at night is to wear lipstick to bed. Do you hear that, Jane? Scientists will tell you that sleep paralysis happens when you wake up in the middle of REM sleep, the deep part of sleep. The part that usually happens around 3 AM, which coincidentally is the witching hour. So, science or ghost, you decide.
And now we come to number 3 on the list, and we got Mo Sargi and the Old Train Station. I feel bad for these YouTubers that have channels that are all about terrifying places. It becomes your livelihood. You literally need to go into some haunted places, possibly filled with demons that want to eat your lips just so you can make some money. I think I would rather be one of those guys that clean dog poop out of parks. Well, unfortunately for Mo, this is what his viewers crave, and it led him to walking down an abandoned train station at 3 AM. While doing doing this, a bunch of super normal things happen, like the sounds of a crying little girl. And at points, there even seem to be small, child-sized handprints on the windows. Is this because kids like to play around old abandoned train stations? Or because there's a scary little child ghost that's waiting to steal your body so she can live once again? I don't know, and frankly, I'm not gonna find out. The only mystery that I'm gonna solve is who's this season's Bachelor. I love trash TV.
Alright, I started this list by talking about witches, so I wanted to end my part with something magical at number 2. We have Dobby on CCTV. Dobby is a free elf. Had to say it. This was quite a recent 3 AM occurrence, and it looked like Dobby the house elf, or a tiny creepy troll. I'm gonna go with house elf though, because even though they're both a little bit creepy, one can make puddings float, and I think that's kinda cool. So 3 AM Dobby went viral in June 2019 when Twitter user JB tweeted this footage with the caption, "A lady posted this and said she saw this on her home camera this morning, very early hours. What do you all think it is?" The internet was quick to respond and say that it is the late great house elf Dobby. Dobby's dead though, so this is some like reincarnation stuff going on. In just 1 week, the footage got 31 million views. The footage was shot on CCTV camera outside Vivian Comas's home, and as of yet doesn't have an explanation. It seems like the footage has been declared as authentic, so it isn't doctored. Some say that the footage is of a kid in a funny hat, but like, why are these kids out at witching hour? Unless, you know, they're little demons. I think a lot of kids are little demons, so I'm gonna go with that.
And finally we have number 1 with Lou Rock at the Yellow House. Honestly, if you ever wanted to check out a haunted house, this would be the way to do it. Wait for a streamer to go into one with a live stream. That way you can see all the spooky stuff in moment. Nothing's edited. And if the streamer gets attacked by a ghoul, you can spam F in the chat. Lou Rock decided to do just this. He went with some of his crew to go check out a famously haunted house known as the Yellow House. While inside, I'm sure you can imagine some weird stuff started happening. First, he entered a room with a bunch of clothes hangers which started moving on their own. Then he walked into a space and heard what seemed to be a glass falling off a table, but no one else was in there with them. Then he heard the noise again. Then he also came across a rope that looked like it was used to hang someone upside down by their feet. There was also a room that had all the drywall busted out, like it's haunted by a ghost named Kyle. In the end, Lou gets pretty spooked and skedaddles out of there so he can live to live stream another day. At number 10 we have the hooded figure. Okay, so we're gonna kick off this list with a classic. I think whenever you see a hooded figure, whether it's in your sleep paralysis or when you're walking down the street, it's always terrifying. You have no idea what's under the hood. They could pull it up and reveal a disgusting face full of maggots, or it could just be some regular lady who really likes hoods at the worst time. But this encounter with the hooded being comes from Redditor Curly Bacon, and he said he would wake up in his room unable to move, and a tall entity shrouded in black would be posted up in the corner of his room. Every time he saw this thing, he could not see its face because it was covered by the classic dark cloak, but he could feel that it was looking at him, and he also felt that this thing was evil. I mean, that makes sense. If you're a good guy, you don't appear in people's rooms at night and then stare at them while they're petrified. You're too busy teaching blind kids how to read. At number 9 we have red eyes. Alright guys, this one comes from Reddit user Black Feathers. Now he says that this happened to him while he was living in his dead grandfather's home. One day he went to take a nice little afternoon cat nap with some music on, and before he knew it, he was stuck in sleep paralysis and the music started to twist into crying voices. Then the closet he was facing started to open up, and what was in it? Well, a new Equinox home gym complete with workout gear. Just kidding, it was a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes, and it started to whisper the word hell. He then woke up and ran out of his house. At number 8 we have the Gremlin. We have another one from the Reddit user Curly Bacon. I feel so sorry for this dude. Like, I love sleeping, it's one of my top 5 favorite things. It's up there with like eating, YouTube fight videos, memes, and when dogs have their ears flipped on the inside out. Oh, it's so cute, I love it so much. But when Curly Bacon over here falls asleep, he's like, wow, I wonder which one of my sleep paralysis demons is going to come visit me tonight. I'm so popular. And the Gremlin sounds horrible. He says he will see this thing in the corner of his rooms, and it'll even sometimes be on the ceiling. Oh great, it's athletic. And it will always be whispering to itself in some weird language. On the most uncomfortable occasion, he said that he woke up in sleep paralysis and the Gremlin crawled over to his back and then stuck its long snake-like tongue into his ear. A demonic wet willy. Ugh. At number 7 we have black creatures. Dark floating creatures, things wearing black hoods, ghostly black creatures. I think there's definitely a theme here. I wonder if you just got a nice little nightlight to brighten up your room, then all your sleep paralysis problems would go away. Like the figures would just look way more cheerful. It would either be that or they would actually see their demonic faces and would be 10 times more terrifying. Well, this guy would have encounters with a black creature in his room, and he said it would shapeshift. It would sometimes take the form of people he knew. He felt like it was in a way to trick him. Once he said it took the form of his brother on the other side of his door and was trying to ask him for help. He knew it wasn't his actual brother because his brother didn't live with him. Ha, you gotta get a little smarter, demon. At number 6 we have the Cuddler. Now, even though I've given this one a nice cute name, it's not the kind of cuddling you want. This one was written by Reddit user Bumpstart Broomstick, and he talked about when he would get sleep paralysis, he would be visited by a figure that he couldn't see, but he could feel it climb into bed with him and then start cuddling him. This thing felt like it had bony arms of a skeleton and would get so close to him that he could feel it breathing on his neck. I bet if you changed those bony arms for nice squishy skin covered ones, then this wouldn't be that bad. I could use a surprise cuddle every now and again. But the worst part is that when this bony creature leaned in close to him and he could feel it breathing on him, it whispered, "Not yet. You're not ready yet." What the hell does that even mean? At number 5 we have Justin Bieber. Why not? Why not? Put Justin Bieber on the list. Oh, what? We got Justin Bieber sneaking into your room in a sleep state and ruining your life. I'm pretty sure you could sue him for that and make a killing. Well, this was written by a huge Justin Bieber fan named Dee Jansma. When she was a young girl around the age of 12, she had a big old Justin Bieber poster in her room. She would go to sleep facing the poster, so it would be the last thing she saw when she fell asleep and the first thing she saw in the morning. Yo, I think this girl needs to chill a little bit. You can take things too far. I understand being a fan, but you're kind of turning into a psycho. Well, one night this backfired on her because she woke up in sleep paralysis. Instead of seeing her beautiful Bieber, she saw a decomposing man in the poster staring back at her. Once she woke up for real, she quickly took the poster down and it never happened again. You sound like a fake fan. At number 4 we have Chomp Chomp. Swinging in at the number 4 spot we have a story from one of my favorite Reddit user names, Lebowski Achiever 12. The dude abides. He said he wouldn't get sleep paralysis often, but when he would, he saw this black figure walk into his room and stand over it. It would then bend down so close it was about 6 inches away from his face, and then it moved over to his ribs and it would start biting down on his ribs. He described this as extremely painful, but he couldn't move. Eventually, he would let out a massive scream and the figure would explode into a black cloud. So that's how you kill these things, you just yell at them. I thought the only thing you could destroy with yelling was a marriage where people were bad at communicating. At number 3 we have Take You Away. So what do these sleep paralysis demons want? Well, in the case of Reddit user Jellybean Skittle, fun name for a terrifying story, it seems they wanted to take her away. She suffered from a head injury, and after that her sleep paralysis worsened. She would wake up and be unable to move but feel a presence of something in the room with her. She would then feel as something was trying to drag her off her bed and then towards the mirror in her room. Maybe this creature wanted to take her to some sort of other world through the mirror. At number 2 we have multiple dark beings. In this one we have not 1, not 2, but 4, 5, or even sometimes 6 demons floating around a room. It's a nice little demonic party. Such a great time. And these guys mean business. The person who wrote this story said they would have to scream themselves awake. That would be terrible to sleep beside. These demons would even get super close and whisper nursery rhymes in her ear. At least if it's coming from a demon, you know it's probably an original. I don't think dark floaty figures were raised on Hush Little Baby. And on one occasion, the demons started stabbing her in the stomach. These guys have no chill. After this, she woke up with a ruthless pain in her abdomen. She obviously was terrified, so she went straight to the hospital. It turns out her appendix exploded. This is super creepy. Did the demons cause this to happen to her? Or was it the more logical answer that her appendix was exploding anyways and the hallucinations made it seem like the demons were doing it to her? Really? I don't know. At number 1 we have The Masked Man. Man. Alright, topping off this list, we have some stuff that will make you want to wet your pajamas tonight when you're sleeping alone with all the lights on in your home. This comes from Redditor Hoobshanker, who wrote that one night in an awful case of sleep paralysis, a masked figure with long demonic nails walked into his room carrying a sack. The figure opened up the sack and proceeded to pull out each one of this Redditor's loved ones and then slit their throats one by one with his long demonic nails. He then walked to the edge of his bed and started to stroke his head with the blood blood-covered claws until he woke up.
Starting off number 10 now, we have the figure and the gremlin. This one comes from Reddit user Curly Bacon, who said, I've had cycles of sleep paralysis for as long as I can remember and regularly see two different demons. The hallucinations are visual, auditory, and you can physically feel them at times. They have become more vivid as I've gotten older. One is a tall, dark, hooded figure that always stood at the bottom of my bed. My scariest experience with him was when I woke up one night with sleep paralysis and the big spooky guy was standing right next to me. His hood was covering his face, but I knew he was watching me and I knew he was evil. The second one I see is a smallish gremlin type creature that's got pointy features and is a browny green color. He normally appears when I'm on my back and restricts my breathing and speaks in a weird whispery language. I woke up once and he was crouching in the corner of the ceiling. When I looked at him, he turned his head and looked right at me and smiled. I woke up on my side and I could hear him behind me speaking in his freaky language, and then I felt his snake-like tongue going in my ear and making a slithery noise. Alright, moving on to number 9 now guys, we have Not Ready Yet. This one comes from Reddit user Bumpstart Broomstick. They also shared a happier story after this one about their guardian angel, but that's not what we're here for today, I'm afraid. They said, I have a few different sleep paralysis demons and one sort of sleep paralysis guardian angel. The demon ones are the usual shadowy figures standing over me or by my bedroom door. The worst one was while I was laying on my side with my back to the door and it felt like someone got into bed behind me. They were under the covers and put their arm around my waist. Then it felt like they were cuddling into me and I could feel breath on my neck. It felt like they cuddled me for about half an hour. All this time, I'm trying to not show I'm panicking because it feels like I'm getting cuddled by a skeleton with claws. It was only about the second, maybe third time I'd had sleep paralysis, so I nearly had a heart attack when this thing feels like it's moving in closer to kiss me behind my ear. Worst of all, it whispered, "Not yet. You're not ready yet. I'll come back when you are." To me, it sounded disappointed and also excited. It felt like it was silently telling me that it was coming back when I was about to die. It scared the living daylights out of me. Next up at number 8 now, we have the children. This one comes from Reddit user Get Joe a Cookie. They said, I had the sudden urge to wake up one night, and as much as I tried to open my eyes, I couldn't move my body, and I could only get my eyes open for about a split second. Each time I opened them, I could see a figure getting closer and closer to my bed, till I think I woke myself up out of fear, and I don't remember what happened after it got about 2 feet away from me. I was 16 when it happened to me, and I had no clue what it was, so for a few weeks I was convinced that the house was haunted. I did not sleep well or without a light on. It wasn't until I told my mum about it that she said it sounded like sleep paralysis. Another time I went to bed one night and it was when I was falling asleep. I could hear children giggling outside the window and in the room, then out of nowhere in my ear I hear whispered, "Wake up, wake up, you have to wake up." Coming in at number 7 now, we have The Scream. This one comes from Reddit user Watchtower Wolf. This scared me just reading it, if I'm honest. No pictures, no music, it was just me reading the text in the middle of the day. I hope you guys are ready. They said I get to see mine about once a month, usually somewhere near the full moon. It starts out usually with me waking up. I can always tell what is about to happen, so I try to scream and wake someone up to shake me out of it. If that does not work, I try to move my limbs and force myself to roll out of bed and wake up. This typically does not work, so I know it's time for the visit. A shadow forms along the floorboards of my bedroom and starts going up the walls. I can then feel the presence of radio or TV static. This shadow starts to form into a demon similar to the early renditions of Slender Man. He has no eyes or face, just little balls of static where the facial structure should be. He slowly starts edging closer and closer to my face, and the volume of the static rises, and I can feel it very lightly shocking me. It then puts me in some weird trance by grabbing the sides of my face and screaming directly into it. The scream is so shrill I can't even describe to you how terrible it is. As this happens, the room starts to turn red and these giant arms start to form into long spikes. So while I'm stunned, it starts taunting me with the spikes, rubbing them around my neck and heart. He then reaches up and stabs me directly into the throat, and I wake up. Next up at number 6 now, we have The Imposter. This one came from Reddit user Godween Satan. If you guys were thinking that a stranger appearing in sleep paralysis is creepy, imagine if it was someone you knew. They said, I remember waking up from a creepy dream and lying in bed for a minute. Then my mom opened the door and I could see her silhouette. Was she there to comfort me possibly? She didn't say anything. She then eerily hobbled into my room and started looking a little more creepy. She looked a little like a creature from Where the Wild Things Are. I could only see the dark outline of her body and head, but her hair appeared messy and her head looked larger than normal. I was on the top bunk. My baby sister was asleep below. My mom stood at my bed. Her head was about level with my own. She stood there for a minute at the side of my bunk bed and I could begin to sense that things were weird. She then reached out and started tickling me a little. I wasn't freaked out quite yet. Then I began to feel uncomfortable, but the tickling intensified. She began grunting quietly, almost as if she was murmuring something. Finally, I was trying to tell her to stop, but of course, words were impossible to form. The tickling intensified until she was scratching and jabbing and digging at my torso. By then, the grunting had eventually grown into a deep growling and howling. I couldn't move or make any noise. All I could think was, why wouldn't my little sister wake up and help me? Scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the abduction. Here's one that really blurs the lines of sleep paralysis and the paranormal, and it comes from Reddit user Black Feather. They said, one night I remember I was tired from playing my GameCube and I laid down and got ready for bed. I remember not being able to move, although I was completely awake. I remember white, bluish light coming from around my bed and lighting up the room. When I was able to move my eyeballs for a moment, I saw 4 white alien figures at the corners of my bed. I felt as though the room was moving around me and I was being abducted. As the aliens started coming closer to my paralyzed body, I fought the paralysis and immediately got up. My body was in cold sweats and I turned on all the lights in the room. For a while, I was trying to fight off the notion that what actually happened to me was real. I'm sure some of you guys are now sitting there saying it definitely was very real and it was definitely aliens. Let me know your thoughts on that one. Coming in number 4 now, we have the Blue Demon. This one comes from Reddit user Creepy Matt, who said this story happened to them when they were about 13 or 14, which I think makes it even creepier. They said, I remember waking up and hearing really loud scraping sounds. At first I thought it was my father because his legs are not good and that's the sort of sound he makes when he's walking. I remember that I tried moving, but I couldn't do anything at all. I could barely breathe. I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't make any sound at all. I was starting to panic, desperately trying to say something or just move a little bit. The sound was getting louder and louder to the point that I could barely stand it. I also started feeling a pressure right on my chest. That's when I saw a strange head in front of me. I was laying on my side all of that time. I remember the head being male, skinny, bald. Its ears were sticking out and it had a sort of bluish color. The head started talking to me, but the only thing it said was, you have to warn her. After it said that, the head started to just fade away. After it was gone, I started regaining control of my body. I was completely terrified and my heart was beating like crazy. Keep in mind, I had no idea that something like sleep paralysis even existed. I remember I went to my computer and just typed something like woke up and couldn't move at night. I was kind of relieved when I started reading about it. I've had other experiences, but there were no heads anymore. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the old woman. This is a short one from Reddit user DreX, who said, my first and only time that I've seen someone transform was from dream to reality. I was dreaming, it was this pleasant dream of a person that I had a crush on. Then I realized I was dreaming and so it became a lucid dream. And all of a sudden I opened my eyes and there was an aged face, like in the Indiana Jones movie when he drinks from the wrong grail. The environment also changed. It went from a lush, vivid environment to complete black. Complete darkness in my room everywhere, and above me this aged old face of a woman, similar to the picture that some of you guys have talked about. By the end of it, I couldn't move. I felt pressure on my chest and the face was just aging before me. Next up at number 2 now, we have the pentagram. This one is actually kind of 2 stories in one, which means this video isn't technically a top 10, but don't say I never treat you guys. This one comes from Reddit user Lebowski Achiever 12. They said, the first time I had sleep paralysis, I watched a figure darker than a pitch black room walk from the hallway into my bedroom. Then it bent over at the waist and seemingly stared at me about 6 inches from my face. Then it tried to rip my heart out of my chest by chowing down on my rib cage. Trying to scream was useless. For what seemed like eternity, I was completely frozen. Finally, I screamed and it exploded into a cloud and dissolved. The second time, I was playing in a metal band and I crashed at our bass player's apartment. He had all sorts of pentagrams and various hell-loving metal posters all over the walls in the living room. I was on the couch and watched the same dark figure I'd seen years before walk into the room, sit in a chair across from me, stare at me again, and just point at me until I could finally scream. And finally, at number 1 now, guys, we have Grandfather's House. This one comes from Reddit user Black Feather. Again, we had one of their stories before, and just like before, some of you guys may say it has an element of the paranormal. They said, the worst experience I've ever had happened after I graduated high school and moved into my grandfather's old house after he passed away. I had a couple of roommates who were out and I decided to take an afternoon nap. I knew as soon as I shut my eyes what was going to happen, but I never could have imagined how intense it would be. The music I had playing in the background began to morph until it was nothing but the sound of unknown voices screaming and crying in pain. I had fallen asleep on my side, facing a pair of doors leading into my walk-in closet, which slowly began to creak open and gave me a glimpse of complete darkness surrounding a pair of ruby eyes staring gleefully at me. As the doors continued to inch open, the piercing cries intensified, and I was able to pick out the word hell being repeatedly screamed. I managed to jerk myself out of it just before the doors opened halfway, and I wasted no time bolting out of bed and into the safety of my front yard.
Starting us off at number 10 is sleep paralysis. Now I know you've definitely heard of this one. I feel like we've done countless videos on just sleep paralysis stories alone, but every time I hear the stories of somebody who's gone through it, I get like, like tingly and scared all over. Now sleep paralysis happens when your physical body refuses to wake up, but your brain is still very much active. The paralysis is actually supposed to happen though because it stops us from getting up and acting out our dreams. It prevents sleepwalking, and if you've seen Forensic Files, then you know that you can actually commit a murder when sleepwalking and not even remember you did it. So prevention is freaking important, you guys. But sometimes it just hangs on for too long, and when we're ready to wake up, our muscles just say, nope, not today. Now, the scary part comes from the 75% of sleep paralysis victims who also experience hallucinations. These hallucinations, for whatever reason, are rarely ever friendly. People will often experience a sense of dread combined with a feeling of something sitting on their chest or choking them, and sometimes their brain will feel like having an extra bit of fun and make a demon or something just appear somewhere in the room. Coming in at number 9 is REM behavior disorder, which is actually the exact opposite of sleep paralysis, so it's when your brain is asleep but your body is wide awake. People who experience this have been known to scream, yell, punch, thrash out, and yes, sleepwalk. Sometimes they even run around in their sleep. That is good cardio. Now people who experience this will often remember their dream, but they won't remember the movement associated with it. It's kind of like an out-of-body experience, and unfortunately because the reality their brain is telling them is quite often different than their actual reality, injuries are pretty common with these outbursts. REM behavior disorder is usually more common in adults and can sometimes be a sign of Parkinson's disease, but the sleep disorder can be treated with medication, so I mean, yay. At number 8 we have night terrors. These are a bit worse than your average run-of-the-mill nightmares that you're probably familiar with. Nightmares happen during your deep REM sleep, but night terrors happen pre-REM, which can make them seem a lot more realistic. And as scary as they are for the people experiencing them, the fact that they're not in REM can make them do things that are scary for everyone around them as well. People experiencing night terrors will often sit up in their sleep and scream, yell, or cry, and won't be able to be woken back up or comforted. And they sometimes end up sleepwalking too, which sounds like a terrible combination if you ask me. Now thankfully they only do last between 10 to 15 minutes, so thankfully you likely won't have to lay awake for hours listening to your child scream in their sleep. They'll probably wake up and be like, Mommy, what's going on? And you'd be like, here Jerry, have a glass of milk. Filling at number 7 slot is exploding head syndrome. Now before you get too concerned, this one is thankfully nowhere near as scary as it's titled. Now for people afflicted with the syndrome, they are often woken up from a really deep sound to an incredibly loud sound like an explosion coming from either right next to their head, or it kind of sounds like it's coming from inside their head. Now apparently there isn't any pain or danger involved, which I personally find very hard to believe. If I'm woken up because of an explosion next to my head, I would think I would at the very least have a headache. But I guess the body's just weirder than I thought it was. I am not a doctor. Now at number 6 is insomnia, and even saying the word automatically reminds me of the Craig David song, which I know every single word to and will be a lifelong banger. Now insomnia is something that is often taken really lightly by a lot of people, but it can actually be very serious. The longest time that anybody has ever been awake because of insomnia is actually 11 whole days. After even just 3 days, hallucinations can start to appear, so imagine what the this person would have been seeing at day 11. Plus, each year sleep deprivation causes at least 100,000 car crashes and 1,550 deaths. Not to mention the other health issues like high blood pressure that can come as a result of it. So yeah, insomnia is a bit scarier and more serious than not being able to fall asleep until 2 AM, which by the way, Becky, is no big deal. Coming in at number 5 is nocturnal eating disorder, aka sleep eating. Something that in theory sounds great, but in reality can be very dangerous. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like, eating while asleep. Being able to eat and sleep at the same time sounds pretty great. Except it's quite dangerous, and not just because it's a major choking hazard, which it is. Now some people who have this disorder are known to use sharp knives or even use a stove or oven when they're asleep, which can obviously lead to some serious injuries. Think of the potential house fires, you guys. Also, something tells me that your sleep self may not be able to tell you not to eat something you're allergic to, so that's just another way this whole thing could go up. And number 4 is narcolepsy. This condition happens when your body is unable to regulate between its sleep and wake cycles, and you just kind of fall asleep anywhere, like randomly. Now just to clarify, this doesn't happen to everyone who has narcolepsy, but it is one of the symptoms. This can be dangerous, of course, namely because people have been known to fall asleep while driving or doing other things that require your full attention. Imagine having narcolepsy and being a surgeon, and then you just fall asleep mid like heart transplant. Actually, they probably don't let you become a surgeon if you're a narcoleptic. Someone tell me, I don't know. Filling on number 3 slot is false awakening. Have you ever had a dream where you were peeing only to wake up to a wet bed? That is, as far as I can tell, the only definition of false awakening, wetting the bed. Which, like, in the grand scheme of things, really isn't that big of a deal. Half of us have wet the bed a billion times growing up, so whatever. But it can definitely be super embarrassing when you're a full adult, and sometimes if it happens regularly to an adult, it can be an indicator of an even bigger health issue. Okay, so TMI now. The last time I actually remember peeing the bed was when I was like 7 and my family and I were on holiday to Thailand, and my sisters were arguing because they both wanted a bed to themselves, but I obviously had to sleep with one of them, and obviously that sister was not happy and then was actually mortified when I then later peed the bed hours later. Now at number 2 is Klein-Levin syndrome, also known as sleeping beauty syndrome, and also not sponsored by Calvin Klein. This to some sounds like an absolute dream, no pun intended. This is when you can sleep for an insane amount of time, and I'm talking like 20 hours a day, and these episodes can last for days or weeks and are also characterized by binge eating, compulsive behaviors, apathy, hallucinations, and childlike behavior. I'm sure we've all had our parents yell at us for sleeping too much, but I'd hope the parents of people with this syndrome are a bit more understanding, considering the fact that this is a bit more than a teenager being lazy. It's actually really hard to live with. Imagine you're in high school and you have a bunch of assignments due, or you're about to study for a final exam a week from now, and then you fall asleep and then wake up 30 minutes before the exam. Like, it's debilitating. And finally, at number 1 is getting beat up in your sleep, even though you live alone. Now this phenomenon has a surprising amount of stories to go along with it, considering the fact that it sounds kind of impossible. But yeah, a lot of people have claimed that they wake up after feeling like they're being hit or punched or beaten up in their sleep, and even have bruises when they wake up, which would suck normally and probably cause a fight between siblings, except these people mostly live alone. Some scientists chalk it up to them flailing around and injuring themselves in their sleep, but even more people think that there's a more supernatural reason behind it. Honestly, anytime I wake up with like a random scratch on my arm or back, I'm like, whoa, where the hell did that come from? And then I realized it was me scratching myself in my sleep. Oopsies.
Coming in at number 10, we have the screen. Falling asleep in front of the TV is a pretty normal thing. You throw it on and then you just let the soothing sounds of Netflix take you right to bed. But if you're someone who suffers from sleep paralysis, then that screen can become a gateway into a dark world that should have been locked away. This story starts with someone just falling asleep on the couch, but then next thing you know, their eyes are wide open staring at the screen. There was only static on the screen, which is strange because they weren't watching watching cable. They went to get up to turn it off, but they couldn't move. Their eyes were open, just staring at the screen, and then images started to flash, one after the other. This creature, it had a ghostly white face that never moved. It was almost like it was a mask, and in each image that popped up, the creature would be doing something horrible to what looked like to be the person who was having the sleep paralysis. She kept seeing it torture her in the slideshow from hell. Then it looked like the creature was looking at her through the screen. It kept getting closer and closer until she snapped out of it and woke up. It's safe to say that she never fell asleep in front of the TV ever again. Coming in at number 9, we have Demon Dog. Demon Dog sounds like the title of a sick metal band, but it's unfortunately a story that would make it hard for you to trust your pets. If you have a dog, you know it's normal for them to jump up on the bed and snuggle up next to you as you fall asleep. For some reason, it always seems like they take up the majority of the bed, even if they're just a little guy. But if you're the person from our next story, that would be the least of your problems. Someone woke up in the middle of the night stuck on their bed. They couldn't move. The only thing they could see on their bed was their dog. It seemed like their dog was staring at them. It had snarling teeth bare. Its eyes were wide open, but they looked like black pits. Then it looked like the flesh started to fall off the dog's body. It was a horrible zombified version of their pet. The animal mutant wasn't moving, but it was growling and getting more aggressive. Then right before it seemed like it was going to attack, they woke up and their pooch was just sleeping there peacefully. Coming in at number 8, we have a multi-face. Sometimes people will have bouts of sleep paralysis so often that they give names to the horrors that haunt them while they're trapped in a coffin of their own body. One Reddit user wrote of multi-face. It was a large robotic looking figure that would walk into its room, and it had a head that was similar to a Rubik's Cube, and the face would move like one. The pieces would shift and change to different distorted images. Sometimes it would reveal a blank square that would just stare back at them until they could break free from their paralysis. But sometimes the image that would form would be horrifying. It would be anything from a bleeding face to horrible images of their own death. Eventually, through some meditation and stress relieving exercises, this Reddit user was able to get rid of multi-face, but it's something that's always floating in the back of their head every time they fall asleep, because any night could be the time when this horror show returns. Coming in at number 7, we have the Hangman. Not every monster you encounter in the frozen waking state is going to try and work its way into your bed. Some of these horrible creatures are just going to stare you down and make your sleep so unpleasant you'll start drinking coffee at 3 AM to make sure you never fall asleep again. The Hangman was a horrible story posted online about a monster they would see in the middle of the night. Out of nowhere, it would drop down into the room. It would be a person who was being hung. They couldn't move any closer to them, but it would stare directly at them while it made horrifying gurgling noises. It would start to vomit up pus and blood, and our writer could hear it slap on the ground. Clean up on aisle, my nightmares. Coming in at number 6, we have a body bag. To be honest, this point sounds so scary, it would make me sleep with all the lights on for the rest of my life, but at the same time, the way that this person's subconscious mind understands suspense might mean they should write a horror movie. Their body bag monster would appear behind their door out of nowhere. It was a body bag that clearly had something inside it. Then the thing would flop on the ground and start writhing all over the place like it was trying to escape from the body bag. It would never work its way out, but the tension of what would pop out was always insane. Coming in at number 5, we have Flame On. This next monster sounds like the worst encounter with a human torch you could ever have. A Reddit thread asking about what was the worst thing you've seen in your dreams had a disgusting story about a creature they called the Hell Victim. It would crawl out of the floor and it seemed to have a human body, but it was contorted in horrible ways. The creature would move in jagged movements like it was in pain, and all the skin looked like it was burnt off. In fact, sometimes they said they could smell burnt flesh in their petrified state. The beast would work its way to the edge of their bed, put its face right next to theirs, then they would feel the Hell Victim start sucking the life out of them, and in that moment they would jump out of the bed and regain control of their body. Ugh, that sounds gross. Coming in at number 4, we have screams from the hallway. A common cause of sleep paralysis can be stress, and there isn't anything quite as stressful as having a baby, so it makes sense that having a baby would kick up a struggle with this sleep disorder. But it would obviously make your nights, which are already hard because of your baby, waking up even harder. A mother wrote about the nightmare she went through after her newborn baby was in her home. She would wake up in the middle of the night, stuck in her bed, and hear her baby crying. The cries would change to a scream, getting louder and louder, until eventually there was silence, and then menacing laughter would creep in from her open door. When she could eventually move, she would jump out of the bed, rush down the hallway to find her baby sleeping soundly. She wrote after her baby grew up a little bit, the nightmares stopped, but for the time while she was tormented by this, it was the hardest nights of her life. Coming in at number 3, we have tentacles. Everyone has different fears, but there's definitely some common ones. Something that might have been rooted into society by H.P. Lovecraft is the fear of sea creatures. A Reddit user talked about the dread that would come out of their closet. When stuck in a state of woken coma, this person would see tentacles start to creep out from the bottom of their closet door. They would wiggle out and start to move closer to their bed. As they would get closer, they would hear a guttural growl come from the closet, like there was a beast behind the door waiting to devour their frozen body. The tentacles would work their way into the bed and start to wrap themselves around their body. They felt icy and clammy. Right as it seemed the beast had a grip around them and they would be pulled into the darkness of the closet for some creature's midnight snack, they would snap back to reality. Coming in at number 2, we have bugs. I think this is a pretty common fear. It's hard to find people who really love bugs, and even when you watch a YouTube video of someone playing around with insects, the common thought is, what the hell is wrong with that person? So I think most of you at home can relate to this horrible sleep paralysis monster. A Reddit user wrote about their experience with sleep paralysis, which was hundreds of bugs moving around under their blankets, all over their skin, on every inch of their body. Just hearing about this makes my skin itch. If this person looked out into their room while this was happening, they would see bugs all over the room, crawling on the walls, even on the ceiling. The Reddit user said this didn't happen a lot, but when it did, it was absolutely horrible and would make it hard for them to fall asleep for weeks after each event. And coming into the number 1 spot, we have the coffin creeper. This one is horrifying on so many levels, and it combines like 8 different fears into one thing of not being able to move. I snagged this one off of a website where people talked about the worst nightmares they've ever had. Someone said that when they would suffer from sleep paralysis, it would start with them opening their eyes, staring at the roof, and not being able to move. This would then progress to the room shrinking. It would slowly start moving in and enclose around their body. This would happen slowly, but fast enough that they would start to panic even though they couldn't move. Closer and closer the room would get to them until it locked around them like they were in a coffin stuffed in a wooden box without the ability to move anywhere. Then they would hear it. Right beside them, it would seem that they were not alone in their coffin. They couldn't see this thing, but they could feel ice cold hands brush up against them, and then they could hear a voice say, "Welcome." No thanks, guys.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the tall man. I started experiencing sleep paralysis during the exam period of my first year at university. It was a very stressful time for me. The first time that it happened, I woke up with the feeling that I was being suffocated. My bed was literally swallowing me up. The more I panicked, the faster my pulse and breathing became, and the quicker I was disappearing into the bed. I couldn't move a muscle, and my attempts to scream were silent. After I calmed myself down, I kind of drifted out of my paralysis state and then woke up completely. The second time it happened, I woke to see a very tall man standing by my door, holding something behind his back and moving towards me very slowly. This is terrifying. Once again, I couldn't move and I couldn't make a sound. It is definitely the most terrifying experience. That was from a Reddit user named Sophie W. Thank you for sharing. Now, the best way to get out of sleep paralysis is to focus on a single muscle, ideally like your toes or your fingers, something small to get you going. Kind of like in Kill Bill, just get those little piggies moving and then you're all set. We have 9 more stories on this list. Honestly, I don't think I can handle this. Let's do it. Number 9, the friend with no face. My worst experience with sleep paralysis was after I'd been up all night doing an essay. When I finished, I immediately dozed off. The next thing I knew, I thought I had completely woken up, except there was a shadow demon looming over the end of my bed. Always demons in beds, this is horrible. It didn't have a face, but I could feel it staring at me, and it felt like pure evil. Ugh. I tried with my whole body to scream, but nothing came out, which only made me panic more. More than fair. I felt like the demon was about to attack me, but then his head twitched to the side and he pounced on my chest, sort of thrashing at me. It felt like it was suffocating me, and I tried to close my eyes again and put all my energy into waking up and to move my body, and the whole time with the demon hallucination still attacking me. That is terrifying. When I was finally awake, I laid in bed for about half an hour, shaking next to tears. It was probably the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I thought it was just a really vivid nightmare until a few months later when I first read about sleep paralysis online. That's from a user named Lola. That is absolutely one of the worst things I've heard. I'm glad this hasn't happened to me too often. Number 8, family visit. So I'm in my early 20s and I used to have mild hallucinations when waking up without the use of an alarm while being unable to move. This was years ago and it never really bothered me, but it happened this morning, which was kind of my fault. So I hung a jacket from the hood on a closet door all the way in front of me the night before, and then when I woke up I saw a woman standing there with the jacket on and her back turned. Somehow I assumed someone I knew was laying in bed beside me. I don't know who it was, so I tried to yell to the person over there, then slowly the woman turned and I could see her from the side, and it was my cousin who had died last year and was just staring at the mirror on the door. That's terrifying. I forgot to put this one in. I was like, ooh. At this point, I am losing my and I can't seem to yell out. Then all of a sudden, I regain movement and I end up yelling, "You see her, right? Right? What the is happening?" I turn and there is just a blanket laying beside me, and when I look back, I easily make out the jacket hanging still on my closet door. I'm still freaked out. That was from a Redditor that was anonymous, which is always a good sign. Yeah, anything that's like clothing that around you when you're sleeping, that's a no-go. I used to have to like go and like rearrange my laundry pile in the middle of the night. Because I'd be lying there and I'm like, is that a face? I don't know what that is. I move it around a bit and I'm like, okay, it's less scary, we're good. Number 7, moving around. I got sleep paralysis a couple of times when I was a kid, but it became really bad in my second year of university. I would wake up unable to move and feeling someone or something sitting on my chest. Now it got worse when I started to see things always in the corner of their room. It was always a dark figure and it was always watching me. Now sometimes it would whisper things, which of course freaked me out. One time I was dragged down the bed by this dark figure, unable to stop it, but I managed to force myself to wake up. When we moved out of the house after second year, the sleep paralysis stopped, and I've only had 2 episodes in the 6 years since. That was from Reddit user named Charlotte. The getting dragged down the bed part and then the fact that it stopped when you moved, that's terrifying. That sounds not great. Now it sounds weird to say, but hopefully that place was haunted and it didn't follow you. It's not a you thing, you know what I mean? It sounds bad to be like, hey, hopefully it was a ghost, but hopefully it was a ghost. Best of luck. Number 6, the man with the fedora. I've woken up countless times in the night to see a man standing in my room. Either it's a bald guy or a guy wearing a fedora hat. It's the scariest thing imaginable. That's from a user named Laura Snora, and that's the entire post. That's a pretty short one, and at first I obviously chuckled, but this man has been seen around the world in nightmares, apparently. Yeah, an article from 2018 on The Week details the phenomenon. I did some digging after a casual Reddit post like that, as I normally do, and this Hat Man has inspired documentaries. This is an entire thing. There's even a blog called the Hat Man Project. If you make one typo, you're going to a different website. You're like, wait a minute, what's this guy? Why does he look evil? So if you ever want to scare your roommate, just put on a fedora. Boom, that's it. They don't even have to be asleep. Just be like, hey, look what I bought today at noon, and then put it on. And they'll be like, oh, no. Number 5, the woman in black. I once had a woman in black experience after watching the film where I woke with a heavy weight on my chest, and in the corner of my eye, I thought I could see someone at the end of my bed. The figure had a large hat and a black veil hanging down over its face. It started to stomp its feet and scream at me as if it was trying to get me to look at it. I'm assuming that I would die, like in the film if I did, but luckily I couldn't move. I was laid on my back with my head to the side, and I remember trying to move to pick up a glass to throw at the figure. Nice, that's classic signs, you know, throw a glass of water at any alien. Could work, there we go. But my arms wouldn't work. When it came around, I burst into tears. It was one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had, and still to this day, I can't sleep on my back. That was 3 years ago. That's from a username Sam42. Honestly, I wouldn't sleep on my back. I actually wouldn't sleep at all after that experience, so kudos. Number 4, too close for comfort. Sleep paralysis started when I was 7 and it was scary. I remember the walls shaking and a ringing in my ears, and I remember going through a tunnel. This continued into my teens, and sometimes I felt like I was battling entire groups of demons that spoke strange languages. Then I explored lucid dreaming and following my spirit guides until they became unpredictable and began biting me and being evil in general. Okay, I'm getting a little bit darker now. When in my late 20s, I discovered that I could be intimate with the beings. I know you're thinking that that's disgusting. Now, I wouldn't do anything, it was strictly in my head. This would immediately send me to sleep afterwards, and it has added the effect of making the paralysis enjoyable. So she would go and sit in a corner and in her head, have some things happen with sleep paralysis demons, and then after it was done, she'd go to sleep. Honestly, best case scenario, at this entire list, that should be number 1. Number 3, nap time. My first experience was in junior high and has continued to sporadically occur throughout my life. I'm 25 now. The worst experience I've ever had happened after I graduated high school and moved into my grandfather's old house after he passed. Sorry for your loss. I had a couple of roommates who were out, and I decided to take an afternoon nap. I knew as soon as I shut my eyes what was going to happen, but I never could have imagined how intense intense it would be. The music I had playing in the background began to morph until it was nothing but the sound of unknown voices screaming and crying in pain. I had fallen asleep on my side facing a pair of doors leading into my walk-in closet, which slowly began to creak open and give me a glimpse of complete darkness surrounding a pair of ruby eyes staring gleefully at me. Ruby eyes staring gleefully. It's kind of like, I don't even know how to imagine that, it's terrifying. As the doors continued to open inch by inch, the piercing cries intensified and I was able to pick out the word hell being repeatedly screamed. Okay, out of all the words you're like, ooh, that's the worst one. Next to like, I don't know, moist. I managed to jerk myself out of it just before the doors opened halfway, and I wasted no time bolting out of bed to the safety of my front yard. Yes, go outside and just stand outside. No one does this in horror movies. They always go to the kitchen and have like a warm glass of water. Just go outside, just run to the park, I don't know. Feeling the sun on my skin and seeing the neighbors' kids playing in the street had never felt so good. That was by Redditor Black Feather. Thanks for sharing. Always run outside if you see ghosts. Actually, no, don't. It's probably bad advice. Number 2, morning breath. I used to get them quite a bit. I guess school was stressing me out. I've graduated now, but that was in high school. But most of mine were auditory/sensory. I've never seen anything, thankfully. I think the worst one that I experienced was when I was in bed laying on my side facing the wall with my back to the rest of the room. Rookie mistake. I had a queen bed at the time, so there was quite a bit of room left. This was towards the end of my sleep, so when I was waking up, then I felt this terror wash over me and then something was next to me, forcing me almost to get out of bed. I had a squeaky bed too, so I heard it. I physically heard this feeling. I was absolutely terrified at this point, so I was just clenching my eyes shut, and this thing is like hovering its face right by mine, and I could feel it breathing on me. It only lasted a few minutes, but it felt like forever at the time. One of the worst things I've ever experienced. The brain is amazing. Everything else is creepy, garbled voices, and the feeling of something on you. It got to the point where I felt like if I would just wiggle my toes and fingers, I would get out of it. See, that's why I give advice at the beginning. This comes in play. Spirit fingers. If you have demons in your room, just spirit fingers. Don't do gold, do spirit fingers. And finally, number 1, buzzing around. I've had it multiple times. That's a kickoff right there. I mainly find it happening after a night of partying or maybe the first full sleep after. I always know it's going to start by this strange buzzing sound and pressure in my head. I've heard voices, felt presences, and been convinced that there were aliens standing around me. That's so scary, there's like, ugh. But one of the most realistic ones was a hallucination of me falling off my bed and having a seizure. Half crawling and screaming for help, but no noise would come out. This is horrible. This is definitely number 1. This is why we do it. Eventually I was able to shake myself out of it, but sometimes if I don't give myself time between shaking myself out and trying to sleep again, I'll fall right back into it. That's by Redditor Loves the Only Way. Great name, horrible reality that you're living in. I hope you are sleeping in peace now. I hope you figured all this out.